Hello and welcome to your flute Q&A for January 2021. Welcome to 2021. Hopefully this year is going to be better worldwide than 2020 was. Yes. All right, so this format of this Q&A is a little bit different to the weekly mini lessons that you get from me. And that's for one big reason, is that this video is not beautifully edited, if I do say so myself, like the mini lessons are, which means you're going to have to put up with me reading my notes. You're going to have to put up with me thinking. So sometimes in videos that I record, I stumble over my words and then I have to think about what to say and I edit that out and you don't get to see me doing all this blabber. So in these Q&As, you get to see the real Jane in real time with my slow thinking. I'm a bit of a slow thinker. Well, it sometimes looks like I'm a slow thinker. It's working overtime in there. All right, so we've got lots and lots of questions. So I'm going to try and get through as many as I possibly can in this January flute Q&A. Let me just double check that I'm recording because that would be bad if I wasn't. Yes, I am. Excellent. Okay. The first questions that I'm going to answer are students of the Flute Academy. I'm prioritizing your questions because you're in the paid program and your questions are often really, they're at a, what was I going to say? I was going to say at a higher level, but it's not that you're at a higher level. It's that you have the experience behind you to ask detailed questions. So these questions are going to benefit everyone. You, if you're listening and you're not in the Flute Academy, these are going to be beneficial to you because they're coming from students who have more experience behind them because of being in the academy. Okay, the first question comes from Kristin. It is, I would like to know how to approach my lifetime of scales. This is from the Flute Academy. There are major scales, minor scales, arpeggios, in thirds, different rhythms, articulations, etc. So much to cover. I don't know how to break this down. Do I practice one scale at a time until I have it? And then what does have it mean? Is that at a certain tempo? Do I run through the circle of fifths every day or randomly pick a couple to work on each day? I've tried several approaches, but I'm still overwhelmed. So it's a really good question. This is from the Flute Academy. This is one of the sheets. It's called the Lifetime of Scales. This is what Kristin is talking about. See, there you go. There's my thinking. There's my thinking moment that I can't edit out. You just have to like see my brain working. So Kristin, the reason that it's called a lifetime of scales is because it's literally for a lifetime. Feeling overwhelmed is a symptom of thinking that you should be able to do all this now. So you'll see the accompanying lesson on this Lifetime of Scales lesson talks to you about, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I just want to give you an overview about how much is out there. So in other words, don't try to complete everything now. Think about it as a lifetime's work. So that's one thing, and I know you've seen that, but let me just reiterate that. It's if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because you are literally trying to do too many things at once. Having said that, I have definitely got some clues for you. Okay, so there's basically two ways to go about this. You can practice something, hang on. Oh, see, I would edit that out. Then my two, okay, wait. Okay, so there's two ways to go about this. One is that you can spend time on your major scales for, if you're really experienced, for a day, and then the next day spend time on all your harmonic minor scales and just cycle through the different types of scales each day. If you're less experienced, you could do that on a weekly, like a weekly rotation. So spend a week on your major scales and then the next week on something else, the next week on scales in thirds, and just rotate around things. And the second way to approach it, and I think this might be what's going to be really good for you, you can write down all the scales that you know or that you're working on, one on each square, one scale per square, one scale per square of paper. And then you put these pieces of paper into a hat, and then every day you draw out 1 or 5 or 10 scales. So if you're having a short practice, you might like to draw out 2 or 3 scales. So you'll randomly be choosing a scale. If you're having a longer practice, you might like to draw out 10. This is a really good method because it's variety. It's like a test every day, and you can also adapt it to how much time you've got to practice. There you go. There's my thinking time. Now, when you said, do I practice it until I've got it? What does that actually mean? So on the Lifetime of Scales sheet, you'll see that you put 1 tick in the box when you can play it tongued as slowly as you need and 5 times in a row perfectly. And then eventually you put an extra tick in that box when you can do it slurred 5 times in a row, no mistakes. Any speed. It's critical, as you know from the lessons in the Flute Academy, it's critical that you prioritize accuracy over speed. The speed will come when you've got the accuracy, and it will be accurate speed. So there you go. That's what to do about Lifetime of Scales. The next one comes from Zwanie in the Flute Academy. Do I need to tune the flute before playing? And if so, how? I've come across some things on YouTube about how to connect the mouthpiece. Does it need to be tight or not? How do I know? And also, what's the function of the cork? Does it need to be tight or not? Okay, so on a flute, this part is actually called the head joint. This bit here, which doesn't move, is called the lip plate. So when you're talking about the head joint, when you're talking about the mouthpiece, you're probably talking about the head joint. So always when you put the head joint onto the flute, you pull it out a little bit here. So you'll never have it all the way, you'll never have it pushed all the way in like that, because you will be sharp. Always start with it pulled out a little bit. It doesn't have to be exactly this amount that I've got here. If it's a hot day, you're going to be sharp, so it'll be pulled out more. And if you're playing with certain instruments with certain tunings, let's say a piano that's old and is like consistently flat, you're going to be pulled out more so that you can sound correct with that piano. So always pull it out a bit to start with, otherwise you will be sharp. Also the flute is, okay, hang on. The piano, for example, and a piano is an instrument that once it's tuned, you get a piano tuner in, they spend an hour or two tuning the piano, all the notes are in tune. The player then sits down and plays it, and they know that everything's going to be in tune. Now, a flute is a little bit different to that. It's very different to that. You need to get this tuning here just in the ballpark. No, that doesn't even deserve quotes. I mean, you need to get it in the ballpark. And then the rest of your intonation as you play, your tuning as you play, comes from the way you're blowing. So the way you're blowing, how hard you're blowing, and so on. That's called intonation. So this is only half of the story. The other half is the way you play. So you just need this in the ballpark, and then the rest is up to you as a player. Okay. Oh, the cork you asked about. So, I have to get something. Grab your cleaning rod. On the end of your cleaning rod, you will see there is a mark. There's a line, a vertical, can you see it? A vertical line, yes, you can see it, right there. That is a measuring tool. And if you take off your head joint of your flute, that vertical line should be exactly in the middle of the embouchure hole here. So when you look in your flute, you should see that vertical line is right in the middle. If it's not right in the middle, your cork is out of place. You need to take your flute to an instrument repairer and get them to move the cork for you. It's not common for corks to be in the wrong spot, but when they are out of place, probably because they're dry and they've slipped, it will make your tuning be incredibly off. So there you go. Okay, next question comes from Anne. Some people have perfect pitch, but I cannot discriminate if a note I play is sharp or flat or okay. When I play duets with a friend, I sometimes hear a kind of scratching noise, like two empty glasses touching and resonating, and I know that we are not in tune. But I cannot say which one of us it is or if it's sharp or flat. So that's, your question is it possible to develop one's pitch? So you don't need perfect pitch to be a great flute player. I would say out of all the pro musicians that I know, 1 in 10 have perfect pitch. And the funny thing is, some of those people I've known for years and I didn't know they had perfect pitch, because pro musicians, they're all pro musicians and they're all at the same level. Perfect pitch doesn't, you don't notice straight away if someone has perfect pitch. It doesn't affect their ability that much. It's an interesting skill to have. It can sometimes get in the way of someone's learning because they can't handle something being out of tune. Like that piano I was just talking about. If you're playing with a piano that's consistently flat and it's because it's old and it can't be tuned up to the right pitch and it's consistently down, you can play the flute with it. You just pull the head joint out, you tune yourself to the piano, and away you go. Someone with perfect pitch would not be able to do that. It just would sound terrible to them. But for us lucky folk that don't have perfect pitch, we're adaptive like that. Perfect pitch is cool, but it's not an advantage. I guess it's an advantage if you're trying to play one note in tune and everyone... It's an advantage if you don't want to be bothered getting out a tuner to tune an instrument. There you go. You just get your friend with perfect pitch to be the tuner. Just a second, I got to check my notes because I wrote something else for you. Okay, it's really, really good that you've noticed that when you're playing with your friend, playing duets, that you can hear that noise. And yes, you're right, that means you're out of tune. So if I was playing a note with a friend and it was close to being in tune but not quite, and you could hear that difference, I wouldn't instantly be able to say if who it was that was out of tune and which direction it was. It's not really something that you can necessarily just do or learn to do, or you can learn to do it. What happens is the way to get better is it is to have your friend play a note. So let's say they play their A, and then you play your A, and I'm going to make this out of tune. Then you play your A, and that didn't sound that different, so I'm going to do it again. Okay, you have your friend play their A, and then you play your A. Can you hear that A that I just played then was lower? It was slightly lower, it's flatter. Because I pulled that out. That is what you need to get good at. Hearing someone play a note and then someone else play a note and being able to tell who is the flatter or sharper. Eventually you'll get better at that. And over time you'll be able to, when you're playing together, you'll be able to be more aware of your own sound and you'll be able to hear what you're doing, not at the same time as someone else, but in the tiny little gaps where they've stopped playing but you've continued. You'll hear the difference. Or the tiny little gaps where they've played and you haven't. You'll be able to compare much more quickly. Okay, so there you go. And you had a second question too, which is when I play a melody, for example, in G minor, and then I continue with another melody in, for example, D major, my fingers go automatically to the fingering of the last key. At least for a while. Is there any trick to get my brain to realize that the tune or the key has changed? Yes, there is a trick. If you're playing a piece in G minor and then your next piece is in D major, before you play the piece in D major, play the scale. Play D major scale and get your fingers used to playing that combination of notes. Play around with that scale a little bit until you're comfortable, then play your piece. Over time, that switch, that brain switch of getting comfortable in a new key will get faster and faster and faster. I played a piece the other day. I just thought of this then. It was one piece and it was one page. It was maybe 2 pages. And there was something like 14 or 17 key changes, actual key changes, key signature change, full key change in this piece. So on each line of music, sometimes there was more than one key on one line of music. It just kept changing and changing and changing. Cool piece. Can't remember what it was. I was with a band that I play with. So cool because it is just such a fun game when you get good at this to just switch keys. and then switch keys, and then switch keys. So you actually can do it that fast eventually. And the way to do it is to take time to get used to the key by playing the scale before you play it so that you can play the new key accurately. Okay, Lesley, I ignore trills. I don't go there because I have a block about them being too hard. Is there a good explanation on how to trill? And what are the easiest fingerings for trills? Do you have a reference? And are there any cheats for trilling certain notes? Yes, 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 and yes. So there is a trill fingering for every note. And Lesley, you've given me a really good idea for a short course. Maybe as a bonus in the Flute Academy, or maybe it'll be a standalone course, a course on trills, because the reason you have a block about them is because you don't know the trill fingerings that you're looking for. They're actually not hard. It's just something to learn. It's like it's just learning fingerings. So if you struggle to know how to play a certain note, it's because you don't know the fingering for it, generally speaking. So with trills, they're broken up into obvious ones. So like an A to a B trill is just A and B fingering. But there are some that are not so obvious. So for example, E to F sharp. Don't know if you can hear that truck. Yeah, that was pretty loud. There's a building being built next door. Actually, they're excavating the sandstone at the moment. So there are trucks going up and down my street all day, which is really annoying. It's a very quiet suburb normally. Okay, so E to F sharp trill. You wouldn't trill like this. That's quite fast, but it's not fast enough for a trill. So there is a trick fingering. There is a cheat fingering. The reason for that is because all trill fingerings are cheat fingerings. That's what trill fingerings are. It's this, E to F sharp. And you can see how much faster you can get it. So either trill fingerings are just the obvious G to A, the normal fingerings, or it's a cheat trill fingering, like E to F sharp. There's heaps of these. I was going to ask you a question. What did I write here? Oh, that's right. Yes, great idea for a short course. I think I'm going to do it, so thank you for the idea. Also, in the meantime, there is an app, and I want to make a note so that I remember to include a link for you under this video. Just a sec. Okay. All right, I will include a link below this video to a really good app for Android and iPhone, Androids and Apple phones. It's called Fingerchart, I think. And they've got a setting on this app where you can look up the fingering for a particular trill. It might seem overwhelming, but at least it'll carry you through. The course that I'm going to make will not be overwhelming. I love making things much simpler. They will be basically the course that I do will be clumped into obvious trill fingerings where you don't have to think, and then the unusual trill fingerings, which you just need to memorize. But once you start using them in pieces, they come to you quite easily. Okay. Jürgen asks, should I replace the C foot on my flute to a B foot at a certain time? Does it make any difference except being able to play low B? So, Jürgen, I love my C foot. I always play with a C foot. If you don't know what Jürgen's talking about, have a look at your foot joint here. If you have 2 round keys here, it means you have a C foot. If you have 3, 1, 2, and an extra one, and this is obviously longer, that's a B foot. A lot of professionals or even intermediate advanced flute players play with a B foot because they generally come with more advanced flutes. I love my C foot for 2 reasons. When you play with a B foot, high C, this high C, you need to have your little finger on a certain key that's not on my C foot. They're only on B foots. For me, that throws out my whole high fingering comfort level. I like having my little finger free for the high notes. I don't like having to push down that extra key. That's the main reason I don't use a B foot. The second reason I don't use a B foot is because there's extra weight on the flute. I've asked flute players like about this. I don't like the extra weight. I like the balance. I love the balance of my C-foot flute. I've asked a friend and she loves the extra weight. She said it makes it feel sturdy and comfortable and strong. I personally don't like it. Some people do. So it's B-foots are really just a preference. What's the advantage of a B-foot? Like you said, you can play low B. How often do you play low B on the flute? Well, I bought a B-foot, a separate B-foot, so that I could use it. I kept it in my cupboard. And when I knew I was playing in a rehearsal or a concert with a low B in it, I would take my B-foot along and just use it for that rehearsal or concert. The number of times I did that in the 15 years of having a B-foot, probably 3 or 4 times ever. Low B is rarely written for the flute. So let me check, I'm still recording. Yes. Whew. Low B is rarely written for the flute. So it's it's handy when you need it. It actually really is handy. It's a bit of a bummer when you can't play the note that's written. But I just discovered that I just didn't need it anymore. Maybe it'll come to bite me when I have to play in a piece with a low B and I don't have a B foot anymore. So up to you. Suit yourself. Oh, Kim. What a coincidence. Your question. How to play the low B with a B foot? Oh, how do I play the low B with my B foot? My fingers don't reach very well, nor do I have the strength in my breath that low. Okay, so with your fingers, your right hand pinky on the flute always should be curved. When it's using this key, it should be curved. Your right hand pinky should be curved. Not like this, but definitely not like that. So curved. When you play low C sharp, low C, and low B, you flick your pinky to a straight pinky, and that means that you can play the low B and C sharp more easily. Make sure that you press all those keys down, the rolly keys, as well as the flat one for the low C and the low B. That will make sure that these keys and the extra key, if you've got a B foot, will actually close. Now, when you asked about you don't have the breath strength to play that low, the reason for that, if you feel like it's really tough to even get that sound like this, and it's not coming out, you could probably see what I was doing. The hole in my mouth is way too big, and that's going to be the same for you if you feel like you don't have the strength. When the hole in your mouth is small enough, that's how you play a good low note. So start by closing the hole in your mouth. Try not to squeeze it shut, just gently close it shut, and over time get it a little bit smaller and smaller, like over days and weeks. Okay, next question is from Joe. Hi, Joe. He says, Jane, I have a Muramatsu flute like yours, and I'm curious as to why you changed the head joint. I'm assuming it gives it a different sound, and if so, is that what you were trying to achieve? Yes, that is exactly what I was trying to achieve. But since I bought this head joint, maybe 15 years ago. Oh, maybe more like 20. Well, in actual fact, that's a replacement because the one I bought got stolen, but from a car. But this is the same as the one I had, or similar anyway. Same head joint maker. So yes, when I originally got my good flute, this one, this is in the 90s, there was early 2000s. There was a bit of a trend at the moment, and I don't know if it was an Australian trend or a Sydney trend or a worldwide trend, which was a cheap way to get yourself a better flute, a really good pro flute, is to just get a good basic pro flute, which is what my Muramatsu EX model is. This is the bottom level Muramatsu. And then spend the money on a really good head joint. So this head joint cost the same amount as my whole flute. So it doubled the cost of my flute, but I ended up getting a flute that is much better than what that would be by itself and for less cost. So the funny part to this story is that in 2005, when I went to Europe, so to Paris to learn the flute from a really good flute teacher, but I also did a summer academy in Austria, and there were heaps of French people there. Lots of people had Muramatsus. I don't know if Muramatsus are just incredibly popular in Europe, but I suspect it's because one of the teachers that was teaching there, he played a Muramatsu and he advocated for his students to have Muramatsus. None of them had different head joints. They all had Muramatsu head joints. And they were kind of mystified why I had this. And that started me thinking, going, oh, maybe I never really needed to get that. Maybe it was just a bit of a trend at the time. But then I think about the difference in sound that this gives me to the Muramatsu head joint, and I love it. It's such a different sound. So that doesn't really, maybe it does answer your question. Yes, I did it for the sound. I don't know if I would, I don't think I'd recommend that to an advanced student now. I'd say get a good flute, and a good flute will have a good head joint. And above all else, I would recommend to that student, work on your technique. Your technique will change your sound far more, 100 times more, than spending money on a good head joint, or spending money on a good head joint. Improve your technique, improve your sound. Like, listen to the difference in this. So this is bad technique. A bad sound. So there you go. Oh my God, that makes me dizzy. I'm so sensitive to getting dizzy. Oh my God. Whew. I just got hot and I got nauseous from demonstrating a bad sound. Because I was taking in too much air, that's why. Okay. Now, fast forward, that person that you just saw play then, I'm going to improve their technique. I'm going to improve their embouchure and improve the way they're using air. They're going to sound... truck. They're going to sound 100 times better than what a new head joint would give them. A new head joint could never make that change. Never. So improve your technique. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Hopefully that still answered your question. Okay, Päivi asks, I've never been taught how to get a good vibrato on long notes. I just know how to play them straight. How do you get the beautiful pulse into them, and how are you controlling the air? So Päivi, go and revisit, or do if you haven't done already, the Day 43 advanced lesson on vibrato in the Flute Academy. I don't know whether you've chosen to do the optional advanced exercises in the Academy, but Day 43 has one and it's on vibrato. Everything you need to know about learning vibrato is in there, and it's not what you think. When I say it's not what you think, good vibrato is a result of really good breathing technique, which is all through the Academy, as you know. Really good breathing technique, and then a few tweaks and a few little clues to get yourself doing vibrato. So go check out that advanced lesson, Day 43, if you haven't already. Oh, I had a demo for you. I've made notes on what I wanted to say to each thing. Hang on a second. Okay. I want to demo good vibrato for you and bad vibrato. Just actually not for you, because you know what it is, but for anyone else who's listening. Here is good vibrato. Whoops. Now I'm going to keep going, because coming up on the A is a good spot for a vibrato because it's at the top of a phrase. Okay, so I just wanted, at the top of those phrases, I wanted you to hear the good vibrato. That is possible not from learning vibrato, but from learning very, very free breathing. Spend time, Päivi, on the breathing module of the Flute Academy. It's a follow-on from the tension module, because tension is sort of preparing you, getting rid of your tension in all parts of your body, is preparing you for good breathing, then learning the good breathing technique, and then on top of that, day 43, you can start to layer some good vibrato. Oh, I forgot to say, it's really, really, really good that you can play notes straight. It's the foundation for layering on good vibrato. Okay, Geanina. When I play the flute, I feel a little bit of tension in my cheeks. Why? I think it's not good, but I don't know how to fix this problem. Geanina, I would suggest that you go back to day 2 of the Flute Academy and do the exercise or revisit the exercise called 13 Steps to Retrain an Embouchure. If you're getting tension here, it means you're too smiley when you're playing. If you're too smiley, it's a problem because it makes your note sharp, it makes your sound thin, and it gives you fatigue here. Problem with fatigue is that you need to take breaks when you play the flute. You can't keep going. The other problem is that as you strengthen these muscles accidentally here, they get stronger and stronger and more effective, making you smile more and more and more, and you actually want the opposite. Okay, that's exactly, there you go, that was my brain thinking moment that I normally edit out of these videos. Okay, on to the next question. Sarah asks, I seem to make sounds, maybe in my throat, when I'm playing, and I can't seem to get rid of the background accompaniment. Any suggestions? Yes, I do have suggestions. When you have throat noises, it means you have tension in your throat. Normally, tension in your throat, it can be, influenced by tension in other parts of your body. So, for example, if you've got, let's say, a tight torso when you play or tight shoulders, you notice shoulders are pretty close to your throat. Tense, you can't be tense here and not have it affect your throat. So you really want to go through the tension module of the Academy and step by step remove the tension from different parts of your body, and then finally work on your throat. When you can release tension from your throat, you're going to feel much more open in your throat, and your vocal cords won't even have a chance to engage. That's what's happening. Your vocal cords are engaging when you're playing because they're a little bit tight. Your throat's a little bit tight. Now, a teacher said to me once, and this is a good point. It's the noises in your throat are more because of the tension, but here's a little sort of different slant to put it. Instead of feeling like it's a mistake and it's wrong and there's a problem, you can think of it as over-enthusiasm, because your vocal cords engaging to make those throat noises. Are you starting to speak or sing? And as humans, we speak all the time. And singing is part of expressing yourself, and you express yourself through speaking as well. So it's your body sort of getting engaged and trying to express yourself through engaging your vocal cords, which we don't want on the flute. You can express yourself through your breath, not your vocal cords. So do work on those things that I mentioned about opening up your throat and going for a free flow of air. And you won't feel, you probably won't have that sort of, I'm a bit slow at remembering my words, what's that word? You won't have that tendency to want to engage your vocal cords like speaking or singing. Okay. Julie, you had a question about this as well. I'll just read your question, Julie. She says, how do you stop your voice from sounding with the note? It's driving me crazy. So exactly the same thing for you, Julie. But I know you're not in the Flute Academy. So so the tip for you, when you know how I was saying that the way to do this is to release tension and then open up your throat. I know you don't have the lessons in the Academy. So you can think about ah when you're playing. So ah when you breathe in, like very open, and ah, and then try and put that into your playing as well. So when you're breathing out, so playing, it still stays ah. And that's one way to sort of get you started in opening your throat. Okay, next question is from Iris. Hi, Iris. When I play staccato notes, I usually find more saliva droplets when I'm blowing out. Is there something I'm doing wrong when doing fast tonguing? So, cool thing. Guess what, Iris? I have a flute student at one of the schools I teach at named Iris. She's 13. So, I love the name. Okay. The first thing that I want to ask you about when you play your staccato notes is, where is your tongue? Where is your tonguing? Where is your tongue touching? Check that it's not out too much like this. So when I did that, not only did I squeak because the air was going too fast, but I felt myself start to spit. So that could be one thing. The other thing that you could be doing is your tongue could be too flat. So instead of ta, 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 you could be going ta, 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 ta. Even that started making me dribble in my mouth a little bit. So that made me dribble. So check out those two things and see if that can help. I suggest that you look at the Day 37 advanced lesson in the Flute Academy. I don't know whether you've chosen to do those optional advanced lessons. If you haven't, go and look at the Day 37 one, because it's called Tonguing Position Actually Varies. I think that's going to help you out as well, just give you an awareness of what your tongue is actually doing. Okay, your second question. I understand I should not squeeze my belly while playing in order to have proper breathing. I can control higher notes better, but not for notes from low C to C. I'm not sure if you mean low C to the next C above. And I usually run out of air, and it's harder to blow with a louder sound for this range of notes. Okay, let me just read that again. Oh, I can control higher notes better, but not for lower notes. Okay. Just going to read my notes because I have something to tell you. I can control high, but not. Okay, so if you can play higher notes but not lower notes, I suspect that it's to do with your embouchure, not your belly. And if you can play high notes but you can't play lower notes and they're not coming out, yes, because you said you run out of air. Yes, and you said it's harder to play with a louder sound for low notes. Okay, right. So it's definitely to do with your embouchure, and I suspect the hole in your mouth is too big. When your hole in your mouth is too big, your low notes will be soft, you'll run out of air. And that's exactly what you just said. So go and investigate that. Okay, your third question. In the academy, there's a whole module teaching breathing. So how to properly breathe in. Oh yes, you're talking about the whole body breath in the academy. She said, now I'm thinking, is there a technique for blowing out air using the whole body as well as breathing in with the whole body? Which part of my body should be used to control the airstream to prevent myself from blowing out too much air? So the whole body breath on day 31 of the Flute Academy that you're in, it teaches you how to significantly get more air in. Blowing out, just looking at my notes here, blowing out, same thing as reverse. So it's exactly the same feeling when you blow out, but in reverse. But there are some differences. Okay, awesome. You will totally benefit from the day 30 exercise called the Holy Grail. What did I call it? The Holy Grail of embouchure flexibility. Day 30 is all about embouchure flexibility, and this is what teaches you how to control the air when you're using your whole body breath in reverse to breathe out. So it's more about so you need to free up your whole body, which is what the whole body breath is in the Flute Academy. Once you've done that, you do it in reverse, but you need to learn which part of your body to control. It's basically your embouchure. Once you've got everything else in order, which you learn leading up to day 30, it's your embouchure that helps you control. And I definitely don't mean by squeezing it closed. Go and do that embouchure flexibility exercise because it's very detailed and it's so fundamental to breathing out efficiently, using your air efficiently. So breathing out properly so that you can use your air efficiently with a small embouchure hole that is not squeezed shut. Okay. Cath asks, speaking of squeezing, Cath asks, you advise not to squeeze for high notes. I get my top E by pouting more. Am I supposed to do this? Yes, you are. E, high E, this one, is the hardest note on the flute to get out. If you have a split E mechanism on your flute, then high F sharp is the highest note to get out. So for me, F sharp is the hardest note on the flute. When I'm out of practice, that F sharp is the first thing that I accidentally squeeze for, just to try and get it out. Over a few days of practice, when I'm better and when I've got sort of reconditioned my mouth from doing the magic tone exercise, which is, as you know, that's in the Flute Academy. When I do the magic tone exercise to recondition my embouchure, my high F sharp is back to normal after a few days, or even less, if I'm not too much out of practice. High E is the hardest note. Oh, it's okay. My computer almost turned off. High E is the hardest note on the flute if you don't have a split E mechanism. To know whether you have a split E mechanism, have a look at your flute and see you've got this G sharp key here. Go down, see that little bar? That little bar there, that means you've got a split E mechanism, and that means that your E is going to be easier and your F sharp is going to be harder. For all of you who have a split E mechanism, it does not make your F sharp harder, it just makes it feel harder because the E is suddenly easier. So high E, in other words, for you, because it's not working for you, your real way of playing high notes, which I know that you've learnt through the academy, this gives you the grounding to be able to play the real way of playing high notes on your higher notes, and eventually the last note that will work easily for you is high E. So I guess the point is, don't be too hard on yourself for just not being able to play high E. It's the last thing that will come with experience and practice at the real way of playing high notes on all the other notes. Okay, that was a big answer. Hopefully that was not too overwhelming. You have a third. Second question from Cath. If I try to slur up to a top E, I don't get top E, but get second octave A. So is there a problem with the way I'm playing? So this is exactly what I was just talking about, but I'll demonstrate so that if you're not Cath, you know what you know what she's talking about. She says that she tries to slur up to E, up to high E, but she gets the lower note by accident, like that. So instead of, she gets, that's the A that she was talking about. So the answer that I just gave for your first question applies directly to that. Okay, and you have a third question. My third octave, G and A, tend to be slightly flat rather than sharp. Those ones, G and A. Have you any idea what is causing this, and how do I play them in tune? So check that you're not, did you say tend to be slightly flat? Yes. Check that you're not rolled in like this, because that makes everything flat. Listen to this. So if you're rolled in, that will make them flat. You don't ever want to be rolled in like that. Check your cork, that it's in the right spot. I answered a question on the cork earlier in this video, just so you know where to look. Oh, who was it? You might just have to jump back and find where I'm talking about the cork. The cleaning rod lets you know if your cork's in the right spot. Watch that bit and I'll give you more details about the cork and if it's in the right spot. For anyone who's not in the Flute Academy, check out the free mini course on the proper way to play high notes. This is an introduction to that real way, it's ever so slight pout to your high notes. The real way of playing high notes that I was talking about with Cath, that free mini course is an introduction. I'll put a link below this video to the mini course if you want to go and do that, which I highly recommend. Okay, Jim asks, when playing harmonics on low D, I can easily play the next D and the A and the D, but the high F sharp is a struggle. I can't seem to shape the embouchure. Do you have any suggestions? Is there anything... Oh, let me address that question first. So this is what he's talking about, the harmonics. Low D. He said he can easily play the next D and A and D, but not the F sharp. That one. So I've got low D fingering and I'm running up the harmonic series to get those notes. And the one that Jim's having trouble with, that one. Harmonics are great because they are an isolation exercise for the real way of playing high notes. Jim, I know you're in the Flute Academy. So this is what that harmonic exercise is. It's isolating the real way to play high notes. You also ask, is there something inherent in the high F sharp that makes it more difficult to play cleanly? Yes, there is something inherent in the high F sharp that makes it hard to play. Yes, there is. So that last question that I answered about Cath's, you'll probably notice that I talked about high E being the hardest note to play on the flute, unless you have a split E mechanism, which I reckon you do. If you're saying that high F sharp is harder, you probably have a split E mechanism. I talked about it with Cath. You can go have a look at that. High F sharp, it's an acoustic limitation of the flute. It's the hardest note on the flute if you've got a split E mechanism. There is a cheat fingering for it, but basically this is a cheat and I don't really tell people to use it because it doesn't help you play your high notes well. It helps you get high F sharp out a bit, so you can use it as an emergency fingering if you're like really under pressure in a performance. You've got to get a high F sharp softly and it's really exposed and you're nervous. The cheat fingering is this. Middle finger makes it a little bit easier, but it also makes it a little bit flatter. Don't use this as a regular thing. What you want to do is improve your ability to play high notes. Do the high notes module, revisit the high notes module in the academy. It's great that you're practicing harmonics. Practice the real way of playing high notes on those harmonics that you're doing. And you will see that eventually they will become easier. So just try not to squeeze. Try to use the real slightly pouty way of playing high notes on those harmonics. Okay, moving right along to Andrew. I find it impossible to play low C and totally forget low B on my B foot. Just what is the required technique? So Andrew, it's funny, you're not alone with this question. And because of that, I made a YouTube video called Why You Can't Play Low C on the Flute. I'm going to put a link below this video so you can go and check out that video. But here's a quick tip in case this helps. When you play low C, did you know that you need to be pressing the rolly key for low C and the C sharp sort of flat looking key, both of them with a flat finger? Normally your flute is curved when you play the flute. Whenever you're playing this D sharp key, your pinky will be curved, but when you play low C, flat. Press both. Most flutes need you to press both. This is a really high quality flute and I press both keys on it, so it's not about the quality of the flute. It's just that's how you play low C. Hopefully that helps. Go check out that video and there's more detail in there. Julie says, oh, I answered you about how do you stop your voice from sounding with the note, it's driving me crazy. I answered you back there. Martin asks, how on earth is it that the flute developed to require a tiny, weak finger to balance the flute and operate a key? In other words, how do you stop balancing the flute? In other words, you have to stop balancing the flute to play D. Sorry? That's a bit of a mishmash of the way I read that. Sorry, Martin. I'll just show you what he's talking about. He's talking about the D sharp key down here, your right hand pinky. He's saying, if this is used to balance the flute, how do you actually play D and lift it off while balancing the flute properly? He says, it seems like a major design flaw to me. I've got some info for you, which I'll tell you in a sec. He said, I have both the thumb port and the finger port on my flute, which have been really good in helping me balance the flute. Okay, so I've heard that the finger port and the thumb port are good, but I've never used them. I've actually never even tried them. So if they help you, absolutely go for it. It's fantastic. There's all sorts of little add-on things to the flute that help people in different ways. Now, here's the bombshell. The bombshell for you, Martin. Your right hand pinky is not used to balance the flute. Oh my gosh, that was so loud. The right hand pinky is not used to balance the flute. I'm wondering if I should shut my windows for the noise. I hope that's not too noisy. It's just so hot in here. I'm going to leave the windows open because I think that noise is probably not bothering you too much. I think it's bothering me more than you. Your right hand pinky is not used to balance the flute. The balance of the flute actually comes from 3 spots. Here, your left hand here, and your right hand thumb. I know you're not in the Flute Academy, Martin, but if anyone is listening to this and you're in the Flute Academy, go and check out day 14, which is the real purpose of your right hand thumb. This gets you in the right alignment to free up your right hand pinky. Basically, when you've got your flute aligned, that's C sharp with no pinky. That's what I should say is that is no right pinky, no hands on. It's not comfortable, but I can balance that. You don't need your right hand pinky to balance the flute. Because like you said, if you did, it's a total design flaw. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. Whew. That was my brain just having a bit of a read through the next questions. So the next question is from Hele. She said, I find that C sharp doesn't sound that pretty. How do you play it the best? Also, I am impressed that you pronounced my name correctly. Most people get it wrong. This is from last month's Q&A. I answered a question by Hele. I'm sure it's Hele, not Heli. The reason I know that Hele, or sort of know that, is because I think I said when I was at high school, there was a Danish exchange student and her name was Hele. Unless we were all saying it wrong. Okay, so I'm glad I said it right. All right, I'm going to give you an example of a C sharp in a piece not sounding very nice because you're spot on. Most beginners and intermediate students have this trouble with C sharp. Okay, I'm going to play this piece first. You'll see my fingers play the C sharps. I'm going to play it first the way that I play it, and then I'm going to play it with bad C sharps. Okay, now I'm going to turn all of those C sharps into terrible C sharps, and this is probably what your experience is as well. Not that I'm saying your C sharps are terrible, that's not what I mean. But I'm going to overdo it. I'm going to make them sound really bad because this is how a beginner feels. Hear how they're sharp as well? So you will have heard 2 things. The C sharps are now sharp and airy, and the other thing is the notes around the C sharp were also airy, but not sharp. Not as sharp. All right, the way to fix the tuning and the tone of your C sharp is to do the magic tone exercise. You're not in the Flute Academy, but this is a whole module in the Flute Academy. The magic tone exercise is the tone exercise that I use to get my tone back up to standard when I've had some time off. And it's the exercise that I used to get a good sound in the first place. This is as a intermediate advanced player. So this is the exercise that incrementally improves your tone, and all those little incremental improvements add up into a much more resonant sound. There is something that I wanted to tell you, Hele, just a second. Oh, that's right. Now the tone exercise that you do, it doesn't have to be the magic tone exercise. You can find any tone exercise that works for you and that you like doing and use that to improve your tone. Okay, hope that helped. Now, next question I love. This question is from Lynette and Noel. Lynette, I have a really funny story to tell you in a second, and it's not just for you. Everyone is going to find this funny. Okay, Lynette and Noel ask, do long fingernails interfere with playing the flute? Yes, They do. And the reason I know is because until recently, a year and a half ago, I was a nail biter. My whole life, as long as I could, from the time I could coordinate myself to put my fingers in my mouth as a kid, I bit my nails until a year and a half ago. I have up and down with the recovery. As you can see, some of them are short, but we're getting there. They're coming back. They're coming back. It's a work in progress, and I'm mostly not biting my nails. And the finger nail that gets in the way when I play my flute is the left hand index finger, which is one of my long ones at the moment. And I can feel it press into the key, and that reminds me that I have to go home and file my nails, or at least that nail. The funny thing is, this does not bother me at all, because every time it gets in the way of my flute, it is a reminder to me of my success of not biting my nails anymore. So I actually love that they get in the way, because I think, yes, they're long enough to get in the way. I'm kicking this habit, this nail biting habit. The flute is not like the piano, where you really do need to have short nails to play the piano, because you're playing on the tips of your fingers on the piano. The flute does not use the absolute tips of your fingers. It uses rounded hands, but is not the tips like the piano is. So hopefully that answers your question. Now for the funny story. Lynette and Noel. Now, Noel is a cat. Noel is Lynette's, I have a friend Lynette, Lynette's cat. And the funny story is that when I started using my assistant, Rachel, who has been answering emails for you, because I've been getting so many emails, if I answered them, I wouldn't have time to run my business. I would probably barely have time to even eat or go and teach flute students. That's how many. So she's a lifesaver. As you know, she's a flute student, but she's a flute player. She was my flute student when she was younger. So Rachel sent me an email once, and she said, "Who is Noel?" She said, because I thought it was Lynette's husband, but one time Lynette said that Noel was sitting on her lap, or she was patting or scratching Noel or something. And she said, "I'm really confused. Who is Noel?" And we laughed so hard, because I knew from emailing you, Lynette, before, that Noel is your kitty cat. So hi, Noel. Okay, the next question comes from Nils. How about thumb support? Does it help you to relax, or does it conserve your tensions? I'm not sure what you mean by conserve your tensions, but hopefully I can answer your question regardless. So your thumb support. If you're talking about your right hand thumb, if your thumb is too far back, you can be squashing like this, and that can hurt your thumb. If your right hand thumb is too far forward, that can squash your hand, and it will send tension down into your hand, which can affect your thumb as well. If you're talking about your left hand thumb should not be curved like this. It should be pretty much as straight as you can get it without it being, if it was dead straight, my thumb curves back like that, so it's not dead straight. It's got a little bit of a bend to it, but it's basically a flat, straight thumb. If you're doing that, that will give you thumb pain as well, and it's difficult to play like that. Balance of the flute is out. It's just not a great way to play the flute. Okay, hopefully that answers you. Okay, Marla asks, I was just wondering if you could provide any tips on how to practice good posture while playing the flute. Do you have any exercises used by experienced players or beginners? Unfortunately, I often catch myself hunched over while playing. Great question, Marla. If you are hunched over when you're playing, it could be because your music is not up high enough. If you've got your music on a table, you will hunch over so that you can read the music, which is not good for playing the flute. It throws off the balance of the flute. It makes it want to roll forward, and you're going to compensate by grabbing onto the flute. And that will slow down your fingers, because you're grabbing onto the flute to hold onto it from stopping it from rolling. And it'll also give you pain in other parts of your body. This is the reason that there's a whole module on the Flute Academy about balance of the flute, because balance of the flute is so important, because it frees up your fingers to move faster, and it frees up your body to feel less or no pain, and it frees up your body to be able to breathe more fully, and that frees you up to be able to express yourself. So there you go. That's all to do with the balance of the flute. If you're using your music on a table, I would say stop it right away. Get yourself a music stand and put your flute music up at either eye height or just below eye height. And if you don't have a music stand and can't get one, use a bookshelf. So you can choose a shelf that's the right height. It's a bit hard to sort of make your music not flop down like that, but at least it will get you on track before you can get yourself a music stand. Now the other thing is, if you already are using a music stand and you find that you're hunched over, I want you to think of this. I want you to think of, so breastbone, think of a string sort of pulling you up from the breastbone. Not rope pulling you right up, but just string gently pulling you up so that it lifts your chest. And when you lift your chest, you'll lift your chin. That can be a really good visualization for you to stop hunching. So instead of thinking don't hunch, you might find that you're doing this and you get a bit awkward. If you simply think of that string lifting you up, everything will follow with it. Okay. The next question is from Carol. Is there a cutoff age for learning a musical instrument? I'm 83 years old. Will I still continue to get better? So absolutely you will continue to get better. There is no cutoff age. Obviously obviously, like if you were 8, you've got decades ahead of you. So you probably don't have decades ahead of you, but you've certainly got years ahead of you. And it will only take years to get good. So you don't need decades to get good. You can do a lot in years. So when you said, will I continue to get better? Absolutely. And here's the proof. If you think of any skill that you learn at the moment when you're 83, for example, a physical exercise. Let's say you've been given a rehab exercise for a certain part of your body and you need to do these exercises. You would agree with me that you get better at these exercises and they get easier as you practice them. It's the same with flute playing. Any little technique that you learn, the way I teach it's broken down into small exercises and small techniques. It's as long as you understand what I'm teaching you, and that's what I love doing, is making sure that people can understand the small techniques, which is why they're broken down into small techniques. As long as you understand it, which you will, you can practice it in a way that you understand and it becomes easier and it becomes more effective. So yes, you will improve. There's no question about that. So that's good. I'm really glad you asked. The next question is from Sydney. Hi, Sydney. I love your name, obviously. I know you know Sydney, that I live in Sydney in Australia. But if you don't know, I live in Sydney and I have a flute student online called Sydney. How do you take a deep breath while playing without sounding like you're coming up for air after almost drowning? So there's a couple of points to this. Firstly, I know exactly what you mean. Okay, I'll show you an example in a sec. So I know exactly what you mean. If you sound like you're gasping for air, like, or feel like you're gasping for air, there is tension in your body. The way to experience no tension, just sit there or stand there as normal and breathe. Take a fairly deep breath in. Feel how free that is. That's what you want when you play the flute. That freedom, that openness is what you want when you play the flute. That's your goal. Now, just stand there or sit there and do a gasp. Can you feel that you had to introduce tension into your body to make that gaspy sound and gaspy feeling? So that's what's happening when you're playing the flute. So you need to reduce the tension in various parts of your body. There's all sorts of bits of your body that hold tension. Your torso, your arms, your shoulders, your throat, your face, your neck. There's so much, which is why there's a whole module on this. The module is 4 days. 4 days in the academy of just releasing tension from different parts of your body. So your approach, think of opening up your throat. Think of it feeling free when you breathe in normally. That's how I want you to breathe in when you play the flute. Now, oh, and the other thing I wanted to say to you, this is the second thing, is when you're nearing the end of your breath when you're playing a note or a phrase, if you find that you're hunched over, try and recover from that position. It's harder to recover from being squished like this than if you're upright. Now, also, if you're leaning back when you're running out of air and then you try and recover from that position, it's harder. I don't think it's one of these two things for you, because those two things don't give me a gaspy sound. For you, I think it's the tension in your body. So follow those tips and that should help you. Sydney's other question is, I have another question. I didn't start learning flute until I was 62 years old and I'm now 66. One of the hardest things for me to do is count. Do you have an easy way that I can learn to count so my rhythm is right on? Yes. Firstly, differentiate between whether you're having trouble reading the rhythms or whether you're having trouble with the beat. I'm going to answer your question as if you have trouble with the beat, feeling the beat and knowing what the underlying beat is, rather than reading the rhythms on top. It could be either, but I'm going to address this because I think it's probably your beat from the way that you asked your question, and it's because you said one of the hardest things for me to do is count. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to imagine the underlying beat, and the way to get this into your body, into your brain, is walk. So you can walk outside, you can walk down the hallway of your home, and I want you to feel that beat when you walk. And then over the top of that beat, I'm going to do this because I know you'll hear this through the microphone. Through this, I want you to think of one of your pieces and think of it, say it even, in time. So, for example, I'll just use Joy to the World as an example. So your walking might be this speed. So walk and think or sing or say dum dum da dum da dum dum dum. And that's giving you the underlying beat that you will then take with you into your flute playing, and you don't need to walk and you don't need to tap your foot. You can feel that beat underneath. So your next step after that is to stop walking but feel like you're still walking, and see if you can play any piece with the right rhythm, thinking of that beat underneath. That should help you. It's really about getting that underlying beat into your body, and the best way to do that is by walking, because it's such a physical thing that you can take with you, that's part of you and you can take with you into your flute playing. Okay, Suzanne asks, what kind of exercises would you recommend to get speedy fingers on the flute? I play scales in 4 or 5 keys, up and down. Do you have any other suggestions? Yes, I do. That's really good, Suzanne. That's really good that you're thinking about this, and it's really good that you're practicing a few scales. Firstly, tension causes slow fingers. So like what I was saying to Sydney in the last question, tension, what was it? So I just had a brain meltdown then. Oh yeah, when she was talking about breathing. Okay, yeah. So tension in your body causes tight breathing, which does nothing for free-flowing air. Tension in your body also causes slow fingers. So this is what's happening, Suzanne. Let's say you have tension in your shoulders, and a lot of people do. It's very sneaky. It's very, very sneaky. You normally cannot see it, and you're normally so used to it you don't even know it's there. Tension in your shoulders flows down into your arms, into your hands, and into your fingers. That's what makes your fingers slow. That's one of the things that makes your fingers slow. So I would experiment. See if you can relax your shoulders. Firstly, without your flute, just see if you can sort of relax them, float them a bit. Then when you pick up your flute, I want you to use your arm muscles, not your shoulders. So use your arms to hold up the flute and see if you can keep your shoulders relaxed. Try your scales like this. And if it feels at all different, you're onto a good thing. Because if that feels different, it means you've let go of some of the tension in your shoulders. Sorry, my computer was going to sleep. If you relax your shoulders and you use your arm muscles and you play a scale and it feels different at all, that's a good thing. So there you go. That's what I want you to do about your scales. There's actually, Suzanne, one more tip with your scales. You can think about them in groups of 4 notes, and it gives you sort of landmarks through the scale like this. So I'm going to accentuate it. You don't have to accentuate this. I'm just accentuating it so that you can hear what I'm doing. When you think of 4 note groupings, you can then think about that beat that you could hear. You can think about pushing that a little bit faster, and it will help you push your scales ahead in speed. Don't do that if it makes your scales uneven. Don't do that at all. They have to stay even for you to be able to push them ahead. Even if you can get it a teensy bit faster and still even, that's progress. That's good. Okay, Frank says, do you have any tips for doubling? What Frank means by doubling is switching to another instrument, like straight away. Let me elaborate. He says, for example, alto flute or piccolo, and sometimes he even dabbles on tenor saxophone, double on tenor saxophone. He says sometimes you have to switch within a gig, and just psychologically, just keeping track of what instrument you're playing in fast passages, as some fingerings, for example, F sharp on the saxophone, are close but not the same. So you're absolutely right, Frank. Firstly, I switch between flute and piccolo all the time. Piccolo is an extension of flute. It's like playing the top octave of the flute, and then it's like as if there was another top octave of the flute. That's what piccolo is. You need such good technique on the flute, especially up high, to be able to switch to piccolo without fatiguing. So I don't know if you or anyone watching this knows this. I don't find I don't find piccolo tiring, and it's because I've got a relaxed enough embouchure. I use the real way of playing high notes in my flute playing, and that extends onto piccolo. Same thing for alto flute. So my advice to you is continue to improve your flute technique, and it will benefit you in piccolo, and it will benefit you in alto flute, because alto flute is like an extension down the bottom. It's like playing low notes, but just more of that. So the piccolo is like playing high notes, and then any bad habits that you have in the top octave of the flute will be accentuated on piccolo. So that's how I deal with doubling on flute and piccolo. As for doubling on other instruments like saxophone and clarinet, I am not a doubler. I know how to play alto saxophone. I played it at school, in high school. In fact, my saxophone is just over there because I'm going to sell it, because I haven't played it for 20 or more than 20 years. Oh no, I played it at university too, that's right. So I haven't played it for 20 years. So I'm going to sell it. So I know what you're talking about with the fingering, what Frank's saying is F sharp on the flute uses this finger, but F sharp on the saxophone uses that fingering. How do you switch your brain between them? So there is a way to do this. When you're not playing in a musical or a gig and you have time, when you switch between instruments with different fingerings, take the time between the switch to just imagine the feel of the new instrument with the new fingerings. Just imagine yourself playing it before you pick it up to play. That will help you be prepared. Now, when you're in a gig, you're not going to have, like you said, you don't always have that time to prepare. But if you spend the time at home to mentally prepare yourself, feel yourself playing the instrument just in your head, and then switch to the instrument, that transition between the two instruments will get shorter and shorter and shorter. And then when you're in a gig, you're actually going to be able to do it. You're going to be able to switch instantaneously. So I've spoken to doublers about this, and they can switch instantaneously. The people that have trouble are the clarinet saxophone players that switch to flute and they don't have their flute technique down pat, and they find themselves squeezing onto flute. It sounds though that you're primarily a flute player, which is actually quite good, because it means your flute playing is going to be better than other doublers where their primary instrument is a reed instrument. But they can get theirs good too when they learn proper technique, like you've obviously done with the flute. Okay. Yes, that's all I wanted to say to you, Frank. So hopefully that helps. Okay, the next question is from Steve. He says, I've watched the mini course on tone production and my tone improved for a while. Now it's breathy again on passages and even on single notes. It's not clear and beautiful and I'm at a loss as to why. I seem to constantly have to reset the embouchure. Thank you. So Steve, firstly, that is really good that you've heard the improvement and you've paid attention to that improvement that you got from the mini course. That means you're on the right track. Now, I'd suggest, just hang on a second, I've just written some notes that I want to make sure I get right. Okay, cool. You know how you said that you seem to have to reset your embouchure? What it sounds like is happening is you're resetting your embouchure, then you're going on to play how you normally play, and your brain just can't keep that new position while thinking about all your other things at the same time. So this is what I want you to do to get your body used to the new embouchure position. So go and do whatever works for you in that free mini course. Then, once you've got yourself a good sound like you did before, I want you to play something easy from memory. Something where you don't have to think about reading. You don't even have to think about playing anything hard. Or play a scale that you know from memory. What we're doing is giving yourself the brain space to make your body get used to the new embouchure way of playing. So the way that gives you the good sound, giving your brain the chance to just concentrate on that and get used to it. That's what I want you to do, and I want you to repeat that for a few days in a row. When you go on to your harder stuff, if you find that your sound totally disappears, it just means that your brain can't cope with the new technique that you're doing while thinking about all your other stuff. So take that off the table for this session of your practice and practice something incrementally a little bit harder and a bit harder and a bit harder and see if you can keep your new tone there. Okay, good. For anyone who wants to do the free tone mini course called How to Instantly Improve Your Tone, there's a link below this video. It's www.flute.school/free, but there's a link below this video and you can click on that and register for the free mini course. So I'll see you there if you haven't done it already. So Kevin asks, my upper register notes are always sharp. How can I get them to be in tune? Higher notes on the flute are always going to be sharper naturally, and that's an acoustic limitation of the flute. So it's something that all flute players go through. They need to learn how to improve their tone on the higher notes, in the upper octave, and they need to improve how to improve their tuning. That follows on from improving your tone. So improve your tone, and it will improve your intonation as well. And the other thing is, if the other thing that makes high notes, particularly high notes, sharp is if you're blowing too hard. The reason, let me give you a demo, then I'll tell you the reason why. So, I'm going to sit back from the microphone. Oops. I'm going to sit back from the microphone so that I don't blast your ears. I'm going to play the way I play up high, and then I'm going to blow too hard and you'll hear that it's sharper. So here's how I play. And now if I don't use my real way of playing high notes, and means I'm forcing myself to blow harder to get these high notes out because I don't have the real way of playing high notes, I'm going to be blowing harder, I'm going to be using more air, and it will be sharper. Like this. Let's hope I don't deafen you. Hang on. Can you hear that was louder? Trust me, I used more air, and can you hear that it was sharper? So that could be what's going on. Naturally, the flute is sharper up high and improve your tone to improve your intonation. And if you don't know the real way of playing high notes, or you're not as experienced in that high octave, that top octave, you're going to need to blow harder, which is not great because it makes you sharp and you run out of air. Oh yes, One of my favorite exercises in the Flute Academy is the day 19 exercise called the illusion of forte. This is, like I said, one of my favorite exercises. If you're in, I know Kevin, you're not, but if you, a non-Kevin is in the Flute Academy, go and look at day 19 because it's so incredible for learning how to conserve your air and how to get a better tone and be less sharp. The illusion of forte shows you how to sound like you're playing forte, but without blowing harder, in a nutshell. So that's eventually, Kevin, what you'll get up to. You'll be able to play loudly and vibrantly without using more air, which means you're not sharp. Okay, the next question is from Joanne. Joanne says, I can come back closer now. Joanne says, you've mentioned the magic tone exercise. Can you please direct me to the complete exercise? So I'm really glad that you're aware of this exercise because it is fantastic for your tone. It is as you know, it's the incremental improvements to your sound and your refinement of your embouchure, all adding up to give you a more vibrant and resonant, that's the word, resonant tone, and obviously clearer. That's part of being resonant. Joanne, the full exercise is actually days 17 to 23 of the Flute Academy. That's where I take the Academy students through the exercise step by step. I know you know the start of the exercise, which is great. You can just concentrate on that and it will still get you very, very good results for that part of the range of the flute that you know. You can apply this to the rest of the range of the flute and still get really good results. So, yeah, all I wanted to say is that all those refinements that you make, just know that they will gradually add up. That gradually, bit by bit, they all add up into making a much more refined, polished, resonant, strong, without blowing harder, vibrant sound. Debbie asks, how can you get low C to come out? She said, if I can get it at all, it has to be a whole note in order for me to find it and be able to play it. Anything shorter than that, I might as well skip it. So Debbie, this is a similar question to what Andrew asked. I've linked for you to the YouTube video below that I made called Why You Can't Play Low C. Now, that might address your question, but you said that you can play it long okay, but you just can't play when it's short. So this to me points towards your embouchure being tight. So here's an example. If I'm too tight, my low notes, especially low C, are not going to come out. Let me see if I can make my embouchure tight. There we go. Perfect. Woof, first go. There we go. I did it again. I'm proud of myself. That's because my embouchure was too tight. If I relax my embouchure, I mean, that's taken me a while doing the magic tone exercise to be able to get it that strongly low C, but the foundations of it is that I'm not tight in my embouchure. That's really all I wanted to say to you is I suspect your embouchure might be tight because you can play a whole note of low C, which means that you can play it, just not when it's short. You could be tensing up when you've got faster passages, or the other. You know what you actually might be doing. If you can't play it short, you might be doing this in your long C. You might be tight to start with, and then you relax through the note like this, which means if it's short, you can't get it. So I want you to practice your low Cs and see if you can get it clear from the very, very start of the note. Eventually, get yourself to be clear at the start, because if you can have a clear start of the note, you will be able to you will be able to play short low Cs like this. So that's, as I talk to you, that's what I think is happening, is that your embouchure is changing through the low C to get it, and you want to try and start with that low C position. Okay, the next question is, I love this question, from Pierre. My coordination between the actions of my lips and tonguing. Hang on, let me try that again. My coordination between the action of my tonguing. Oh my God, sorry. I think I'm getting tired. My brain is, okay, I can do this. I've got so many questions today. I love that everyone is so enthusiastic with writing questions, asking questions. Okay, Pierre asks, my coordination between the action of my lips and tonguing with the movement of my fingers in a fast passage is sometimes wrong. Sometimes I get intimidated by a fast piece of music. Do you have any tips? Oh, yes, I do. Pierre, it is great that you have identified that it is the coordination between your tonguing and your fingers that is the problem. Most people think that it is their tonguing that's the problem, but you have identified it. So I'm going to give you a demonstration. All right, so this is a piece that has fast tonguing passages. So I'll play it for you and then I'll demonstrate an uncoordination and what to do about it. Whoops. That was not a good demonstration when I play a wrong note, but never mind. I got it the second time. So this might be what starts to intimidate you, is fast passages and probably pieces that have continuous fast tongued passages. So Pierre, yes, there is a way to do it. You need to work out whether it is your tonguing that is uneven or if it is your fingers that is uneven. Now, the way to do that, if you have a look at the piece that I've linked to below in bar 7, this is the Rakes of Mallow, a cute little Irish tune. Bar 7 and 8 go like this. I want you to first isolate your fingers. Play it slurred and see if you can do it evenly. You don't need to slow the last bit. That's not the hard bit. The hard bit is the fast notes. If you can play that perfectly even and slurred, then your fingers are not the problem. Now let's switch. I want you to play bar 7 and 8 tongued but on one note. So just choose a C. If you can play that perfectly even, then it's not your tonguing. And you're at a stage now. Oh, well, hang on. Firstly, if you've got an uncoordination, like a discrepancy between your fingers and your slur, one of those are going to be more uneven than the other. Either your fingers are going to be uneven or your tonguing is going to be uneven. What you need to do is even them up separately, then put it together, and you will find that the passage is much more even because you've linked your fingers and your tonguing to be doing the same thing at the same time. So there you go. Okay. Ooh, I don't know if I can say your name. It's either Scylla or Chilla. She says, and you could be a he. So I could say they. They ask, I am an adult beginner and I have seen your videos about correct embouchure. My problem is that it is taking a long time to develop the muscles that would enable me to have the proper size. Do you have any special exercises or strategies that offer a way to develop lip muscles? Yes. So I'm going to call you Scylla, and I'm sorry if I'm saying this wrong. If you're an adult beginner, it's actually not about developing muscles. It's about getting the correct mouth shape, embouchure, to start with and then sticking with it. Your muscles will develop over time, but it's not, you don't need muscle exercises now. You need the right embouchure shape and then just keep doing that. So there's a really old video that I made on YouTube. I think it's 4 years old. It's the very first video that I made. It's in 2 parts. I'm going to link to it for you below this video. It teaches you how to get exactly the right embouchure using a grain of rice. This is the very first lesson I do with anyone. Someone who has never picked up a flute before and wants to start learning. This goes for adults and it goes for children. Doesn't matter how young, doesn't matter how old. This Okay, just had to stop my computer from going to sleep. This is the very first thing to learn. It gets your embouchure in the right shape, and then as a beginner, you just stick with that embouchure. The reason that you know you've got the right embouchure is because you're getting a pretty good sound. Let's not say a pretty good sound. You're getting a very good sound first go on the flute. So go watch that video, those 2 videos on learning the right embouchure with a grain of rice. It is so effective. It's a super old video. I'm a little bit embarrassed about it because I haven't done my hair. I'm not really wearing anything nice. I don't have a nice background. And it's just, I think I'm a bit kind of blabby. I'm being hard on myself. I'm always too hard on myself. I think that video is excellent. The content of those 2 videos, absolutely excellent, which is why it's still on YouTube. And it's the most watched video, 2 of the most watched videos on my YouTube channel. It's really good. I just think I present better now. But the actual content, spot on. So go watch that. It will help you. Okay. The next question is from Janet. I'm just wondering, where do you align your flute? Just curious. I know we have different mouth shapes, but I'm just curious where you line up your dots. So what Janet means by this is where I line my head joint up. Am I turned in like that, or am I turned out like that? I have my own dots, black dots on the flute that I added there. They're sort of coming off, but you can see them still. Oh, if I get the light right. There you go. I line my flute up there. And the reason that I've worked that out is, actually, firstly, let me show you where that alignment is. So if you have a look down my flute, this will be quite an interesting, oh my gosh, I have to get the camera. You can see that my head joint is actually turned in beyond these keys. A lot of people say, and this is a really good place to start, is that you line that hole up with these keys. Great place to start. That's where I started. That's where I start all my students. I don't know whether you can see. Can you see properly? Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm a little bit unco here. Yeah, you can totally see. See the embouchure hole is rolled in towards those keys. So if I line it up right in line, it's like that. But the way I've got it lined up is that. Oh gosh, sorry, I'm feeling really unco here. The reason for that is, like you said, people have different shaped mouths, and also with experience and with a more relaxed embouchure and a more flexible embouchure, this suits better. It suits me better, and overall it suits good flute players better. I've seen James Galway, his alignment, just on a video, I've seen his alignment of his flute, and it's also turned in like mine. But be aware, Janet, turning your flute in like that is not what makes you a good flute player. It's the other way around. As you become better at the flute, you become more relaxed, you have a more flexible embouchure, you'll find that you need to turn it in more. You'll need to turn it in more to have your hands in the right position, your embouchure in the right position. It just gels more. So it's a really good question that you asked, but I mean, by all means, turn it in a little bit if you feel that it's comfortable. But if people turn it in before they're ready, this is over the years of playing the flute, of the experience. If they turn it in before they're ready, they'll find that it's just a squashed, flat sound, which you don't want. So there you go. Hopefully that helped your curiosity. Okay, the next question is from Eli. He asks, how do I play a low C? Well, you're in luck, Eli, because the same question was asked by Debbie and Andrew, and I have linked to the video on YouTube for you below your question here, and you can go and see for yourself. Paco asks, the notes A to B flat to, hang on, let me say this a different way. These notes, A, B flat, B and C sharp, he's talking about these ones up there. He said they give me a lot of problems when I find them in jumps or at the beginning of a melody. they sound an octave lower, and they sound strident, and they sound as if they're not in tune. So, Paco, I have to thank you because you've taught me a new word. I didn't know what strident meant. So I Googled strident, and it means harsh and grating. So that fully gives me some insight into what you're doing with those notes. If it sounds harsh and grating, strident, there's a very good chance you're blowing too hard. Now, the reason you're blowing too hard on those notes is because you probably haven't yet learned the proper way, the real way to play high notes. Even if you have learned the proper way to play high notes on this E, because that's where you start to learn that ever so slight pout on that E, then you gradually add it into the note above, then above, then above. And this is, I'm talking over days and weeks, getting your control to be effective on those notes that I just played. Eventually you get up to the ones that you said. And the reason that C sharp is the last note that you mentioned, as soon as you get to the next note, which is high D, because the fingerings are different to the octave below, the fingerings help you keep the note up there. So that's why you're having problems with C sharp and the notes below, but not that D. It's because the fingerings give you a helping hand. Having said that, the fingerings give you a helping hand, but underlying that, if you don't yet have the real way of playing high notes under control and some experience with it, it will come back to bite you as you go even higher than that D, as you go up here. So on E's, F sharps, even though the fingerings up there help you get those high notes, if you don't have the real way of playing high notes in your mind, in your body, you will find that particularly E's and F sharps will drop down lower. So it's definitely worth improving your technique, learning the proper technique of playing high notes and doing the exercises that accompany them. I just said accompaniment. Accompany them to help you get those high notes comfortably. And the thing that happens, and will happen for you and happens with everyone, when you can play those high notes comfortably from playing the real way, what you'll find is that you can play them softer and they sound sweeter and you use less air. And that will address your problem of your strident high notes. Okay. If you haven't done the high note mini course already, this is where I start to show you, it's an introduction to the real way of playing high notes. There's a link to the mini course below this video. There's an entire module on high notes in the Flute Academy, and that is an extension of the technique that I teach in the free mini course. So it's worth, what am I trying to say? The technique of playing high notes the real way is so fundamental to being a good flute player that it got its own module in the Flute Academy. That's what I was trying to say. Okie dokie. The next question, Rita. Let me just check if I have enough battery on my computer. Hang on. Ooh, 27%. Okay, we can do this. The next question is from Rita. She says, I have difficulty in relaxing my hands and fingers in order to play smoothly in fast pieces. In part, it's likely body tension. Yes, you're right. And for me, a struggle to trust muscle memory rather than thinking about what I'm doing all the time. Do you have any suggestions for how to make this shift? Yes, there's two things, Rita. When you're playing your fast passages, go slowly and deliberately relax your hands so that you can get used to the feeling. You want to have the brain space to be able to get your fingers relaxed, your body relaxed, particularly your shoulders, and then have that become a habit. And you can only do that when you've got brain space for thinking about it. And the way that you get brain space is when you're not playing so fast, because you need to think more when you're playing fast. Take that off the table, do it slowly, and just see if you can work that habit into your body. So there you go. And now I said that there's two things. Okay, yeah, so the first thing was go slower. The second thing is, you're right, it's very likely tension in other parts of your body. There is So much sneaky tension hiding in flute player's body. The sneakiest of all is in the shoulders. See if you can, I was talking about this in a few questions ago. See if you can float your shoulders and relax your shoulders. And then if you can do that, which you probably can, pick up your flute and use your arm muscles. Make sure you use your arms, pick your flute up, relax your shoulders, and play something. If this feels different, if you feel your arms working, it feels like your hands are a little bit freer, you are on the money. You have just discovered how to get that tension out of your body and get your fingers to be working faster. So pursue that. All right. Oh no, whoops. My gosh, that was my uncoordinated moment. The next question is from Kathy. This is what I just got excited about. I thought I'd missed something. She says, does everybody have difficulty going from C to D and back, or is it just my beginner blues? Is there a finger pattern that makes it easier? So C to D, it's not, let's just check that you've got the right fingering. So C is your first top finger up here, no thumb, and little finger on. D is pretty much the opposite. So D, I talk to my beginner students as D for dog, nose up in the air and tail up in the air. So this is probably your answer. Look how much my hands, my wrists, my elbows don't move when I'm switching. It's only my fingers. Have a look, go to a mirror, switch between C and D and see if you've got other parts of you moving that shouldn't be moving. So for example, your hand might be going. See this? What about this hand? You might find that you're going and your whole hand is moving. See, my elbow was moving. What about back to this elbow? That's not necessarily what you're doing, but if it's really hard and clunky, you could very well be moving parts of your body that don't need to be moving. So that all comes down to hand position. You want your hand position right so that you can move your fingers independently of your hands, your wrists, your elbows. You want to be able to move every key without moving the rest of your body. See if that helps. Okay. Next question. Hope my computer's going to last. Hope my brain's going to last. so many good questions today. Okay, Nikki says, despite hours and hours of practicing the same troublesome notes and watching your videos over and over, I still don't have enough assurance to book in for my grade 5 flute exam because there are parts of my music that I'm struggling with. Nikki, you have actually answered your own question in the way that you've asked it. If you're practicing the same troublesome notes for hours and hours, it means that there's something missing in your technique. It's not the hours and hours of practicing that get you better. It's practicing the right technique that gets you better. If you've been watching my videos over and over again, firstly, I commend you on your discipline and your enthusiasm. It's fantastic. But if you've been watching them over and over and over again, there's something that's not going into your flute playing. So I love that you're aware of the specifics. Nikki has gone on to ask me about specific passages of specific pieces in her exam pieces. And there's a bit of a theme through it. So there's two things that you've mentioned. Squeaking when dropping down to low notes. So for example, G to F sharp, D to middle F. Dropping down to low F, the middle F like this. If it's squeaking like that, it means you're too tight in your embouchure. That is a little clue of what to start working on. If you're too tight when you're dropping down, the notes won't drop down. And the second thing that you asked in your specific questions is that when you're jumping up to F sharp, the high note's not coming out. So kind of the opposite to squeaking. So when you slur up to F sharp, if you don't have the proper high note technique, it will come out like this. Well, that was just a bad example because it worked too well. Let me try and make that not work. There we go. So that is where the F sharp didn't work. The high note, the proper way of playing high notes, is a very, very specific, very, very slight movement. And you really need to start learning it on this E. That is the very first note going up the range of the flute, where you have to rely on your embouchure to get the note out. And it's the first note going up that doesn't have a different fingering for a high note. So what I mean is that E, if you don't use your proper high note technique, it will come out low because it's the same fingering below. Now, you can actually hide from this high note, proper high note technique. If you squeeze or you blow harder, that E will still come out. But it is the place where I want you to learn the proper high note technique. Because if you can learn it here where it's easy, then you can start applying it to the next note up, and the next note, and the next note. If you haven't already, go and do the high note mini course. So how to easily play high notes. I've got a link below this video, and I've just got to make a note for myself so that I remember to put that link below the video. Just hang on a second. Link. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that I really need to talk to you about, Nikki, is if you're feeling anxious about your exam, can you delay your exam and spend time learning proper technique of the flute? Now, the reason I say that is twofold. If you go and do an exam, well, it's kind of threefold actually. You don't want to be too stressed doing your exam and feeling like you're going to fail. Second reason is you probably won't go as well as what you could. If you go and do a flute exam and you squeak or you don't get your high notes out, that's not great for your confidence if you don't go well in your exam. And the third reason is if you do the exam as planned and you go well or you don't go so well, either way, 6th grade, the next one, is going to be such a struggle for you because it's building. It's like you've got foundations that have got some little cracks in them, except that we can fix these cracks. And as you go up to the next grade, up to 6th grade, those cracks are just going to get bigger if you don't fix them now. So if you can delay the exam, and if you want to delay the exam, just do it. Just do it and spend time getting proper technique. It will serve you so much better in the long run if you spend the time now. Anyway, that's my suggestion. See what you think about that. Okay, Ottilia. What a fantastic name. That is such a beautiful name, Ottilia. I've been struggling with single tonguing. My teacher has said that I should stop touching my lips with my tongue when single tonguing. She wants me to make a d sound in my palate, a D sound. Can you explain that to me? Because I just don't get it. When I do it, my articulation just sounds like dla, and like it's very airy. Okay, so Ottilia, you are totally right. Dla is not where you want to be. So I'll explain what your teacher's saying. When you say da, 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 like in English, when you're speaking English, da, firstly, it's the same as ta, ta, ta. So ta and da are exactly the same position. Whichever one your teacher suggests is fine. You can run with that. But if you're getting dla, dla, and it sounds very airy, more airy than what you would normally get with your normal tonguing, it definitely means you're tonguing in the wrong position. So, 2 ways to go about this. In English, da, 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 ta, 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 it should be exactly that position. But if you've tried that already from your lip tonguing, which I will tell you and demonstrate for anyone who is not Ottilia, this is what she's talking about. When she's tonguing at the moment, and this is not wrong, she's more going per. No, it's not per. It's the tongue coming forward to between the lips like this. I'm going to exaggerate it. So that's a real exaggeration where I'm poking my tongue out. Now, Ottilia, this is what I suggest you do. This is a better suggestion than the one I just gave, but I wanted to give you that background. I suggest that you tongue in your normal way, but you just pull your tongue back inside your mouth just a teensy bit so that it's behind your lips and touching your lips, but not poking out. So then once you've got that, pull it back just a teensy bit to behind your teeth, just a little bit. Pull it back and then get used to that. That was behind my teeth. Then when you've got used to that, just pull it back a little bit further so it's just starting to touch your gum behind your teeth. That's as far back as you want to go. You don't need to go any further back than that. That will give you a very, very, very clear tonguing sound, and it will preserve your tone. So I suggest going incrementally. Okay, the next question. Oh, I'm wondering if I should plug my computer in. How much have we got? Oh, no, we're good. 21%. Camille. She asks, is there a trick to making it easier to play low C? I service the flute and change the pads, but still not easy. So yes, I've put a link below this question to the YouTube video of why you can't play low C, and that should help you out. She also asks, how can I master Bach flute sonatas? It made me stop playing for years until I got back into it again. I've not tried Bach yet, but I am practicing every day to raise myself up to that level. Bach is great. The Bach sonatas are great. They're challenging, and it's a really great goal. And also the fact that you're practicing every day is fantastic. You're going to get up to that level that you were at and beyond pretty quickly, as long as you're learning proper technique as well. It's not just the hours and hours of practice. I wanted to put a link below to one of my favorite movements of a Bach sonata for you. So below this, you'll see it's the first movement of the G minor sonata. It's one that I learnt when I was younger, and it's a really nice one. It's not too hard, but it's satisfying to learn. So I'm not sure which one you're learning at the moment, but you can do this one too. And you'll see on this website, Flute Tunes, that there's heaps of Bach sonatas in case you want some variety. Okay, the next question comes from Genevieve. How do you personally know that you're doing the diaphragm vibrato, not the goatee vibrato? So it needs to feel free-flowing. You can try out singing. So I don't know if you can do vibrato when you're singing. I don't know whether this comes naturally to everybody. I'm not a singer by any means, but I can do this. So la, hang on, I've got to sit straight. La. So I can make that feel like it's coming from way down in my belly up through here. Just remove that hair. That is proper vibrato for the flute. It will feel free-flowing, it will feel open, and it will feel like it's using your body, not just using your throat. If you try the throat vibrato when you're singing, it's really difficult to go la. It's really contrived, it's artificial, and it's tight. On the flute, it's the same thing, except because playing the flute is a lot more artificial than singing, and a lot more, there's a lot more room for error when you're learning the flute, because there's so many things that feel unnatural. Like for a start, it's out to the side. That is not natural for anyone. If you find that on the flute you're sounding a bit, compare it to the singing one that I just did. That will feel tight, like the nanny. Did you call it nanny goat? Goatee vibrato. It will feel tight up here. If you're doing real vibrato, using your whole body and a free flow of air, it will sound much more free, open, wide, and beautiful. So that felt exactly the same as the singing one that I first demonstrated to you. Okay, cool. Genevieve has another question. I also noticed in my playing that the A in the middle register up to the high register, my cheeks were getting tired after I play. Is it normal to squeeze your embouchure when you're doing the middle register up to the high register? So lots of people squeeze to get the high notes, but it's not ideal. Here's why it's not ideal. You fatigue in your cheeks, and that's not good because you don't really want to be fatiguing when you play the flute. You want to be, you want to have stamina. Your sound will be sharp when you're tight here. You will have a thin sound, and it's hard to move around the flute. So this is what I mean. So have a listen to, I'm going to pull back here, and I'm going to have tight cheeks from smiling. You'll hear that it's sharp up high. Oh, I forgot to say another thing. It's going to be hard or impossible to play up high. That was sharp. That was a thin sound. It was hard to get up high. And over time, I will fatigue here. Now, the jumping around bit, it's almost impossible to jump around. This is, if you're still listening, was it Kathy? Was it Kathy? No, it wasn't Kathy. Was it, who was it? About the grade 5. Nikki, if you're still watching this video, this applies to you. It's hard to jump around when you're tight. And what will happen is that you can't jump up to the high notes, and when you jump down low, it will squeak. Like what I showed you before. I just did that opposite. So that was a squeak, but I was jumping down. I meant to do a squeak going, oh no, that was right. When you're tight here, you don't have the flexibility that allows you to actually it's a bad example. I'll do Fs. That flexibility to jump up and down like that, you only get when the tension is out of your cheeks. So, Genevieve, yes, it's normal, but it's not ideal. I suggest that you go and do the high note mini course. It's free. I've put a link below this video for you. It's really important that you eventually develop a flexible embouchure, and the only way you can do that is by learning the proper embouchure technique. You take tension out of your cheeks, you take the smile out of your playing, and then you learn the right exercises to jump around effectively and accurately and flexibly. So hopefully, Genevieve, that answered your question. Okay, the next question is from Janice. Janice asks, I'm starting to learn a hard piece. It's the Telemann Sonata in F minor for flute and piano. I can do the first and third movements because they're slow. It's the second and fourth movements that are way out of my comfort zone because they're really fast for me. How do you recommend I approach the second and fourth movements, knowing I'm not up to 110 beats per minute? So Janice, that's a great question, and it's quite an advanced question, and I do have tips for you. So I've put a link below this video to the piece that you're talking about. This is for anyone who's not Janice. You can see what we're talking about. So firstly, a metronome marking of 110 is just a guide. You can see the link that I've put below to the fourth movement. It says 138. And I looked at the second movement as well, and it was 120 something. So that 110 that you've got on your piece is just a guide. You do not have to am I recording? Yes, I am. You do not have to, sorry, hang on, I'm just going to check. Ooh. So the metronome marking of 110 is just a guide. You don't have to go that fast. Even in an exam, they're not going to have a metronome. This is a digital metronome. They're not going to check your speed. It's just a guide. It's way better to go at a comfortable speed for you and play it right. Having said that, these pieces that you mentioned, they are fast and they are challenging, and you do need to be able to play at a certain speed because you wouldn't really want to go into an exam playing them at half the speed or a performance. Okay, so here's a little strategic way of learning a piece. So for example, let's take the vivace, the fourth movement. I want you to learn it in sections. Let's say that you've got a little goal to learn the first 4 lines in a certain amount of time, whether that's a week or 2 weeks or less, depending on what you're capable of. Just hang on a second. I'm just going to shut the windows because my neighbours have decided that now is the time to do leaf blowing, whippersnippering, I think that's an Australian term, gardens basically, and to build a building next door. Just hang on one second. And funnily, just as I did that, a plane went across. So, all right, so here's the strategic example for you, Janice. So you're learning the first 4 lines, but it's more than just, say, learn the first 4 lines in a week. It's very strategic. You're going to start at the end of these first 4 lines, and you're going to learn, for example, in the first day, the last 2 bars. And you're going to get good at that. Now, on the second day, you're going to learn the last, you're going to add 2 bars to that and learn the last 4 bars. So eventually you'll be able to play on that second day. It is totally okay to learn this under speed. At the moment, you're just getting your fingers around it. And you want the practice at playing the right notes again and again and again. That's what's going to get you accuracy, and that's what's going to eventually get you speed. Then the next day, add 2 bars to that. It doesn't always have to be 2 bars. It can be 1 bar, it can be more. So the last 6 bars. Then you're going to add another 2 bars, or maybe in this case 3 bars, because they're similar. So if you look at bar 14, it's and then the next day you might just add 1 bar because it's, you know, it sort of follows a bit of a nice pattern of adding bars that are similar at the same time. Am I recording? Yes, I am. Okay, good. Now, the reason that we're going backwards, Janice, is because if you did this forwards, you learnt the first bar and then the first 2 bars and then the first 4 bars or whatever. You're going to be uneven. You will naturally, and everyone will naturally be better at the start of the piece than at the end of the piece. So what we're doing is balancing this out. We're learning the end of the section first and building back on. And by the time you get to the start, you're going to be good at the start and you're going to be good at the end because you've played the end so many times. That is your strategic piece to learning this. Strategic strategy to learning this piece. You actually gave me a good idea, Janice, as well. I was thinking maybe this is like down the track. Maybe, look, I'm so busy with creating videos for my courses at the moment, the Flute Academy. Plus there's a 5-day breakthrough in the pipeline. This is a short course. It's only going to be $50. It's 5 days, but it's very comprehensive just to give students, not necessarily you, but it can be you, give them a leg up into the next level. I'm so busy creating that at the moment, but I was thinking, this is the idea you've given me, down the track, I might do, and email me if you're interested, or anyone is interested in this, of offering masterclasses on particular pieces. So for example, there'd be a masterclass on how to learn this piece. There's a whole lot more that I haven't told you because it's just not going to fit into the Q&A. Like you noticed I was doing different articulation as to what was written. There's a very good reason why I was doing that articulation. It's stylistically correct and it helps you play it better and it helps it sound better. Then the strategies of actually learning tricky bars, which we didn't go into now. We did a bit of an overall strategy. I'm thinking about doing masterclasses on a particular piece. and it would be a recording, and you could buy this masterclass of a particular piece. People could even make requests of certain pieces that they wanted to learn, and I could record a masterclass and anyone could buy that masterclass. So if anyone thinks this is a good idea, let me know, because I only want to create something that would be helpful to you. Okay, so there you go. That's Telemann. The next question comes from Helena, or Helena. I want to know why our pitch note is in the note. I want to know why our pitch note in the note is A, and how can I get the clearest sound ever while playing the flute? I think what you mean is why our tuning note is A. I think that's what you mean. So what Helena means is when we're tuning in an orchestra or you're tuning to a piano, we play the note A to tune to. Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons for this. The main reason, and I think this is the case because it makes logical sense, orchestras tune to an A because an A for the strings, which is the predominant part of the orchestra, they have an open string on A. So to tune their violin, they have to tune on an open string. And so they start with A, they get their violin actually in tune, and then they get the 4 strings in tune. And then when they're actually playing, it's the intonation that makes them in tune, like where they put their fingers. So that's the reason that flutes tune to an A, is because, I'm pretty sure anyways, because we have to be tuning to an open string of a violin or a stringed instrument. So there we go. Now, handy, and I think this is kind of a coincidence, it would be terrible for the flute if we had to tune to, say, C sharp. Can you imagine if you had to tune to a note that sounded like this? You'd go, oh my gosh, I'm so sharp, and you'd pull your flute out, and then the rest of your flute would be flat as you played. Because as you know, C sharp is a really sharp note, like too sharp note, and as you get more experienced at the flute, you improve your tone across the whole range of your flute using a tone exercise, and that brings the pitch down of those sharp notes, especially C sharp. So we never want to be tuning to a note that's naturally sharp, unless you're an experienced player, and if I tuned to a C sharp, it would be all right. Wouldn't really matter too much if I tuned to a C sharp, although it would be a little awkward. That might be just because I'm used to tuning to an A. Bands tune to B flat. Why do they tune to B flat? There's a reason, I just don't know what it is. But that wasn't your question anyway, so I don't feel bad for not being able to answer that one. Also, Helena, when you said, or Helena, when you said, how can I get the clearest sound ever while playing the flute? Definitely go and do the free mini course. I've put a link below this video for you. Mini course to instantly improve your tone. If you haven't done it, go do it. If you've done it, maybe do it again, and then start incorporating that into your playing. It's really the best way to improve your tone, and it's free. Nigel says, how do you play the lower octaves? Because I can't seem to play it. How do you play the notes in the lower octave? Because I can't play it. Oh my gosh, I really need to get better at reading. I'll show you what Nigel actually wrote. How do you play a lower octave? Because I can't seem to play it. So what I know you mean, Nigel, is how do you play the lower notes in the lower octave? So if you can't play your lower notes because they're coming out too high, so you're trying to do this, but they're coming out like this, and they're too high. You probably saw what I just did to my mouth. I pulled back. Your mouth is too tight if your low notes are coming out too high. Now, the other thing that might happen is if your low notes are too airy and you're running out of sound, like this. So instead of they're coming out too airy, and you're also running out of air. The reason for that, and you probably saw, is the hole in my mouth is too big. Hole in your mouth is too big. So choose whichever one of those is relevant to you and see how you go. Okay, I'm going to take a break because I'm really tired and I've still got a whole lot of questions to go. So I'm just going to take a break and I'll see you when I get back. See you later. Okay, I just had a little break. Let's get back into the questions. So Anne asks, we are playing some very slow pieces in our community band. I find it very challenging to hold long notes when the metronome marking is 48 and in 4/4 time. So she means crotchet equals 48. What is the best way to practice to build capacity to hold long notes, especially when they should be held for 3 or 4 bars? Exhausting. Yes, and so if you've got a long note that is 3 or 4 bars long in 4/4 time when the crotchet equals 48, as in quarter note equals 48, my goodness, so that's slower than a second. So if it's, let's say it's 4 bars, and it was equals 60, metronome marking is 60, that would be 4 times 4, so 16 seconds. But it's actually slower than that. So it's 12, it's like it's 1/5 again on top of that. So 16 seconds. A fifth of that is 3 seconds. So 18 seconds they're expecting you to hold a note for if it's 4 bars at metronome marking of 48. That's a really long time. So the reason I just did that maths in my head is to give you some perspective that that is a really, really long note. When I time myself and I play long notes, I can, if I'm concentrating, I can easily do 20 seconds. That's not a problem. But I've been playing the flute for 35 years and at a high level. I can play for longer than that. If I really focus my embouchure, I get a really good breath, I can probably get it up to a 30 probably. But 16 for someone who is not at a advanced level, it's really long. Anyway, all I'm saying is I feel your pain. No surprises that you're having trouble. Now, a couple of things you can do. Do something in band called stagger breathing, where you agree with the other flutes to take breaths at different spots, and it gives the illusion that it's one long note. And the other thing you can do is actually learn to play your notes longer, which is what you're asking. And there's one way to do that: smaller hole in your mouth. It's the only way to do it. The only way. It's pure physical mechanics. The bigger the hole in your mouth, the more air's coming out, and the quicker you'll run out of breath. Smaller hole. You can't do this all at once. It's the kind of thing that you train your mouth to do over time. Work on incrementally getting it smaller and keeping your good tone. So if you try and do it all at once, you'll just lose your tone. The best way to go about this is go and do the free mini course. I've linked to it below this video. You might have already done it. If you have, keep doing those suggestions in that video. I'm going to put a link below just in case you haven't done it. Check that I'm recording. Yes, I'm recording. Because it will really help you if you haven't actually done the mini course already. Okay, the next question is from Jillian. She says, how do you achieve fluid playing where it's seamless and you can't hear the individual notes? Now, there is a lesson in the Flute Academy exactly about this, on legato tonguing. I call it, with my students, I call it playing more professionally, because it's exactly what it makes them sound like. So there's two ways to make your playing more seamless. Both of these 2 ways is about the join in between 2 notes. So what you want to do is get your fingers to transition perfectly between 2 notes. Let's say it's D and E. So if you're playing any piece, grab 2 notes, any 2 notes, probably the first 2, and then do it with the second, third, and then do it with the third and fourth, and then do it with the fourth and fifth, go all the way through your phrase. And try and get your fingers to move perfectly. If you find it's clunky, like this, or like this, hang on. That was a bit of weird clunky. If you hear it clunky at all, you need to practice coordinating both the fingers that are moving, 3 fingers. So in this case, the top finger, the ring finger, and the pinky. You want to try and coordinate them all exactly at the same time. And you can totally hear this. You can hear the detail in this. Practice coordinating them all at exactly the same time to smoothen up that transition. Okay, so that's the first part. That's your fingers. The second part is your airstream. You want your airstream to continue through that join. And if you can continue it through the join between two notes, and then the next two notes, and then the next two notes, then you can practice continuing the airstream, continuous airflow through the whole phrase. So let me do an example of a piece. Okay, here we go. Swan Lake. You'll agree that sounded smooth. If my airstream is not continuous, it will sound not as fluent like this. So that's an example of airflow that is moving back and forward when it really should be continuous. Now, I didn't show you an example of fingers that are not coordinating exactly right. It will sound clunky like this. It's really hard to demonstrate. It's really hard to make my fingers not work properly. But you get the idea. That was a bit of a clunky demonstration of clunky fingers. But that's what you want. You want really coordinated fingers between two notes and really smooth airstream between the two notes, and then expand it out to the whole phrase. Okay. Shalina. She says, my lips are crooked, so when I make an embouchure, my aperture goes off to one side. For some reason, I cannot get it to blow straight across the flute. I've been practicing with a mirror and trying to find a good tone, but it is airy. My top lip goes to one side and my hole goes to the opposite side. The only way I can get it to be straight is to smile on my right side. I also have a teardrop middle upper lip that gets in the way. Is this something you have ever come across, and is this the correct solution? I can't wait to hear your insight. Great question, Shalina. A teardrop upper lip is normal. It's not... You could say it's not conducive. No, it's not conducive to playing the flute straight and having a hole in the middle of your mouth, but you don't need one. If you have a teardrop flute, a teardrop top lip, the only way you can play the flute is with your teardrop off to one side. Now, this is completely normal and it is completely acceptable. I would actually give up trying to straighten up your mouth. So even though everything you see about learning the flute, it's all about being straight and being accurate in the hole in your mouth, there are heaps of people with a teardrop top lip. And because of that, I did a video on it. I know my assistant Rachel has replied to you already when you sent your email with this question, directing you to the video, but I'm going to put it again under this video just in case you didn't see the email, and more importantly, if anyone else is watching this who wants to know the same thing. I'm going to link below this video so that you can watch that YouTube video about how to play with a teardrop top lip. Heaps. I have seen pros play with their flute down and hole off to one side completely at a pro level. It will not hinder you. So don't worry about trying to get it straight, especially because it's making your tone fuzzy. Just give up on that and work with your already good tone off to one side. It's completely fine. Everyone has different shaped faces. For you, it means that your hole's off to one side. Totally normal, and it's physically necessary to play the flute for you. So there you go. Nothing to worry about. The next question comes from Mike. As a long-term brass player, this is the right question. As a long-term brass player, I am only too aware that the third finger, this one, I call it the ring finger, is less agile than the first and second. He writes, I started playing flute after about 3 months ago, and I think I have made pretty good progress. Your tone and high notes mini courses made a vast difference. That's awesome. But I still struggle with passages that require coordination of the third and the pinky finger. As an example, I'm working on the Forêt Sicilienne at the moment. I realize that it's probably way too hard for a 3-month flute player, but I'm 70 and I'm impatient. After a few days of breaking it down and playing slowly, I can now play most of the first half. However, I'm still finding the third finky... Did I just say third finky? Did I actually say that? Third finger pinky transitions are real pain. So, wow. Firstly, you've been playing the flute for 3 months, and admittedly you have the background of being a brass player. You're playing the Four Sicilian. So normally students play that after they've been playing for about four years or so, you know, give or take a year. So you're doing pretty well after 3 months. Even with your background as a musician, you're doing very, very, very well. So yes, don't be too hard on yourself. When you said after a few days of breaking it down and playing it slowly, I can now play most of the first half. Amazing. That is the best thing you could do for yourself. Just take it slowly, do it bit by bit. It sounds like you're actually honestly, it sounds like you actually are very patient if you're doing that. The way you asked your question with the detail, he also went on to ask the detail of certain bars in the Sicilian, which I'll show you in a second. The fact, Mike, that you're going into this detail, I suspect you are very patient. So good on you. All right. The way to get around this third ring finger pinky issue is to do exactly what you're doing and pay attention to the detail between the two notes. So just as I actually mentioned in the last question, was it the last question or the one before? No, the one before, from Gillian about seamless transitions between notes. I was saying about how to pay attention to the space in between the notes, and you want it to be as smooth as possible. So for you, D and E, here's a great example. Practice going back and forward between D and E as accurately as you can. Start by doing it one way, D to E. Make that transition as smooth as you can, as lump-free as you can. Then do it in reverse, E to D. Then once you're satisfied with that, do D, E, D. When you're satisfied with that, E, D, E. And when you're satisfied with that, join it all together. And eventually faster. Keep the cleanliness of that transition there. Keep it there, because the more you play it right, the more your fingers will remember and do the detailed right version automatically and accurately. Okay, so that's all about detail. You will, I mean, you already know that this finger is a bit of an uncoordinated finger, and so is this one. So look at that. I can't even move my pinky without moving this. That's normal, as you know. So you mentioned a few bars in Sicilian, and I want to give you a clue about one of them. So I've put a link to Sicilian below for anyone watching this who wants to know what I'm talking about. In the third last bar, you've got low C up to E flat. Now, Mike, there is a trick. This is not part of your question about your ring finger, but this is the question that you said they've thrown in the low C just to, you know, throw a cat amongst the pigeons. When you play from low C, let me just get the video back on, just hang on a second. Here it is. Okay, when you play from low C to low E flat, you need to do this slidey thing. Very hard. The weather today in Sydney is incredibly humid, so everything is sticky, including my fingers on the flute. So this accentuates the problem. Going from low C to E flat is really hard to get smoothly. There is a solution. On the side of your nose, do this. I know it might sound gross. And then squidge it onto your flute. You are going to get super smooth transition. This is normal. This is normal flute playing behavior. Normal flute playing technique. This is normal. It's such a cool little trick. So check it out on that bar. And you'll find that you can move so much more easily. It doesn't make your ring finger any more coordinated, but it certainly helps out your low C slurring. Okay. Scott asks, it's my understanding that C sharp is noticeably sharp on most flutes. He means this one. And he's absolutely right. He says, on my flute, although the tuner reads that it is in tune, the timbre is still so edgy or shrill and so different from the neighbouring notes that it sounds sharp anyway. What do you do specifically to tame this note? Thanks for any advice. Scott, it's a great question. If you go back and listen to the rest of this Q&A, because this has come up a few times today actually, from a few people, so you're definitely not alone with this question. Basically, your job to improve the timbre and the tuning on C sharp is to improve your tune. Try that again. To improve your tone across the whole range of the flute. When you improve your tone, it improves the tuning. So, for example, let me show you a fluffy C sharp. It will be sharp. Now, let me show you a C sharp with good timbre or good tone, and you'll hear that it's not as sharp. So they go hand in hand, tuning or intonation and the actual tone and the timbre of the note. So improve your tone and you will improve your tuning as well. The way to do this is to find a tone exercise that works for you. So by a tone exercise, the students in the Flute Academy have access to the magic tone exercise, which is the tone exercise that I use. It's amazing. It's my favorite. That's why I use it with my students, because it's so effective. But it doesn't have to be that one. You can find a tone exercise that incrementally, you can noticeably hear your tone improve incrementally. You have to be able to notice it to know that it's doing the right thing. And also it needs to be a tone exercise that you enjoy doing, because it's the sort of thing that the more you do it and the more you hear yourself improve, the better your tone's going to get and the more you're going to want to play, because you can actually hear it improving. Just check I'm actually recording. Yes, I am. Okay. So I hope that helps, Scott. Yes, it's all part of getting that C sharp to be less sharp and sound nicer is all part of being a flute player, taking yourself up to the next level. Sam asks, do you have any tips for jazz and improvisation on the flute? Is the approach with jazz different to classical, and how? Okay, so Sam, I'm the world's most terrible improviser. I am not a jazz player at all. And yeah, I'm like the world's worst improviser. And I don't actually feel bad about it, because I know that my specialty is teaching players proper technique. That's what I do. I am not an improviser, and I don't even really want to be an improviser. I like listening to it, but it's not my thing. So jazz players come to me to learn proper flute technique, because the underlying technique, to answer your question, is exactly the same for jazz and classical. The actual playing technique is the same. So I've had pro jazz flute players come to me to learn better technique. So they learn easier high notes, so nicer high notes, how to not blow so hard, tuning, a better tone, faster fingers, faster, clearer tonguing. These are the sorts of things that I teach flute players. Whether they're classical players or jazz players, it's going to improve their playing regardless. So hopefully that answers your question. So Jean asks, how do I know the sound is supported adequately? In other words, how should it feel? Thank you. Well, you're welcome, Jean. Not that I've answered your question yet. So it should sound good, and it should sound nice, and especially on a recording of yourself, because sometimes when you play you don't hear exactly how you sound. I mean, you can to some degree, but sometimes you're so used to certain things sounding the way they sound that it's only when you hear a recording of yourself that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm always sharp on C sharp, for example, kind of to use Scott as the inspiration. And the way it should feel, I had to think about this. I read your question before answering this. It should feel wholesome. It should feel like you're using your torso to play. You shouldn't feel awkward, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable, and you shouldn't feel tight. It should feel like satisfying. Like when you sing, like imagine if you sing in the shower, if you sing even not in the shower, and it feels good to sing. That's how a supported tone, supported air on the flute feels, and that's the reason for that is when you sing, you naturally support your air better than what you do on the flute naturally, until you learn. So it should feel like your air is coming from your whole body, not just your head, not just your mouth. So that's why and the reason I say wholesome is because, as you probably know, disciplines like breathing, that's not a discipline. Disciplines like yoga, meditation, they incorporate breathing significantly into their practice. And it uses this wholesome sense of breathing. That's when your air is supported, that's the same kind of breathing that you're using on the flute. All right, so hopefully that gives you a bit of insight. And hopefully that's helpful. So Cherie asks, how do I keep from cracking notes in the middle register? Also, I'm very breathy and I can't seem to change my embouchure to correct that. Now, if you're cracking notes in the middle register, and this is what Cherie means by this. So the middle register, you'd pretty much count this as the middle register, about E, up to about C. That's just a give or take. It's not an exact. In that area, if you're getting squeaks or cracks like this, and going too high, there is only one reason that this will be happening, and it's if your embouchure is too tight. Too tight an embouchure causes cracking and it causes squeaking. So now that you know that, have you done the 2 free mini courses? One on improving your sound, improving your tone, and one on making high notes easy. I would suggest that you go and do both. I'm going to link below to both. I'm just making a note for myself so that I put a link below this question for you. Go and do both. The real way of playing high notes will help you play high notes actually getting the high notes, but the tone course, mini course, will help you relax yourself enough so that you don't crack your notes when you're going for those high notes. All right, so good luck with that. Okay, the next question is from Deborah. She says, I am a beginner who loves the flute. Yay! And I am working to find and keep a stable embouchure. I get very dizzy as I think I'm over-breathing and the hole I make with my lips is too big. Firstly, let me stop you there. You're spot on. When you're breathing too much, it makes you dizzy. When your hole is too big, you're running out of air, which makes you breathe more often, which makes you dizzy. So you're spot on. My question is, how do I make the hole I form with my mouth small enough to not get dizzy while not being too tight and still making a noise and holding it steady so that when I move my fingers, the flute doesn't wobble and lose the sound? I love this next sentence. I love your description. It's like trying to get a tight grip on fog. That's amazing. Wow, you just sort of put me in your shoes instantly there. I get the occasional lovely note, but then I move a millimeter and it's gone. Honestly, I'm so frustrated, but I don't want to give up. Yay for not wanting to give up. Boo for being frustrated. That was a thumbs down. Boo for being frustrated. It's an awful feeling. I know how painful it can feel to be frustrated because you feel like you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to do next. You're putting in a lot of work, something that you really want to be doing, and it's just not working. So frustration overload, I totally get it. So you mentioned about how do you keep your embouchure steady so that you're still getting a good sound when you move your fingers. If this lip plate is too light on your chin, if that's combined with a hand position that is not 100% right, so which means you might be moving a lot to play, this is going to wobble around and it will make you lose your sound. So there's 2 ways to address this. You want a little bit more pressure on here because it does sound like it's very loose. But at the same time, you really want to check that your hands are not moving around too much when you play. So when I change between notes, you will see only my fingers move, not my hands. So you'll see oops. My fingers are moving, not my hands. So make sure that when you look in a mirror that your hands are stable because it's that movement that's making this move. In addition, just get a little bit more connection here. All right. If you were in the Flute Academy, I would direct you to the exercise on day 2 called 13 Steps to Retrain an Embouchure. It's the best incremental, it's 13 steps to take someone like you and address their embouchure issues and get you set up with a good embouchure. But there is something that you can do instead. I've got 2 videos on YouTube. They're my oldest videos. I don't think my presentation is as good. I think I say and probably I'm like, I don't know. I just don't think I'm as good presented. But the content in there is spot on. It's the Flute Academy exercise called 13 Steps to Retrain an Embouchure. That is based on these 2 YouTube videos. So these YouTube videos are like an introduction. I'll put a link below this video to those 2 videos, and I suggest that you go and watch those if you haven't found them already. Okay. The next question is from Jack. He says, very, very short question. He says, middle register breath. He says, middle register breath above G is too breathy still. I'm thinking you mean, Jack, that your notes in the middle octave are too breathy. So if that's what you mean, I've got some advice for you. What I would say to anyone that has a fluffy or a breathy sound is go and do the free mini course on how to instantly improve your tone. There's a link below this video for you. But if you mean that you're getting a good sound down low, but as soon as you go up to the middle octave, or the register as you called it, it's going breathy, it sounds like your embouchure's going tight as you go higher. So for example, I'm going to have a tight embouchure and I'm going to make it so that my lower octave has a good sound, but as I go higher and I tighten up, the sound up high is going breathy. So if this is you, it's because you've got too tight an embouchure. So here we go. I'm going to try this out. So I'm going to be too tight. So you can see that a tight embouchure down low doesn't affect your sound as much as a tight embouchure does up in the higher notes that I just played. So that could be what's causing your issue, but I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly. So I'm going to leave it at that, and you can go and explore if that is something that will help. Okay, Paul asks, I love this question. I have heard people say you should blow into the flute and others say blow across the flute. Yes, they do. How do you set up the mouthpiece for the best sound and hand positions? Right, those people, they're both correct, but they're 50% correct each, and I'll tell you why. When you blow across the flute, what you're actually doing, what's physically happening, your airstream is hitting the opposite edge of this embouchure hole, and the air is splitting. 50% of the air goes out, 50% of the air goes in. So there you go. Those people that tell you to blow across and to blow in, they are 50% right each. If you feel your embouchure hole, you'll feel that opposite edge is actually sharper than the edge closest to you. And the reason it's sharper is because it's assisting the air to split, and it's physically what's making the sound. So there you go. They're both right. How do you set up your mouthpiece? On the flute, this is called a head joint. On other instruments, it's called a mouthpiece. On a flute, it's a head joint. How do you set it up for the best sound and hand position? Right, okay, so if you go back in this Q&A, I answered a question by Janet, and I went into quite a bit of detail about lining up this head joint. Go and check out the response to her answer, because that may well help you. Okay, the next question is from Astrid. I'm a beginner flutist. I would like to know how to do scales faster on my flute. Hang on. How do I get my fingers to be more agile? Now, that's a great question. So great, Astrid, that you're not the only person with that question today. Suzanne had this question quite a few questions back. So have a look back in this Q&A and you'll see the answer to Suzanne's question about faster fingers. That will really help you. The next question is from Vince. He says, as an adult beginner, it's incredibly helpful to me to understand certain milestones that would exist if I were learning the flute as a child. For example, ability to play second register consistently by a certain age or a certain grade, or ability to play the third register consistently by a certain grade or age. Based on your experience, can you give some helpful checkpoints that would help me benchmark my progress? I know everyone progresses at different rates, but an overall generalization would be nice. That is such an amazing question. Vince, look, I'm entertaining the idea. Am I recording? Yes. I'm entertaining the idea of creating a course for total beginners. Total beginners. And this probably wouldn't be for you because I don't think you're a total beginner. Because you can talk about, what you could because you could formulate your question the way you asked. I know you're not a total beginner. If I do this course though, I would base it on milestones that you're talking about, because it is so important for everyone to understand, because I know you're just in this sea of going, well, am I on track? Am I behind? And I really like that you said that you know that everyone progresses at different rates, because it's true, but I also know that it's nice to have, like you said, milestones or benchmarks of where you want to be aiming for. It sort of breaks up this huge journey into doable chunks. So exams can be good for this because there's certain levels, and incorporated into exams are the expectations of certain milestones. So higher notes or faster tonguing or faster fingers. But sometimes it's not really that explicit in exams. You just feel like the whole thing's just getting harder, but you don't really know what they're adding into each exam up. So the way I think about it and the way I teach and the way I explain to people how to improve is that it's all about learning solid fundamentals. So I've got a list here of what I wrote when I was planning out the answer for you. And it is fundamental techniques that I teach beginners from day one, absolute day one. And then I layer these fundamentals on top of each other in a particular order. And then that gives someone the fundamentals that they can take with them and then just get better at the flute. They'll get better fingers. They'll get better faster fingers, better tone, better breathing, better expression, better high notes. And because they've had these fundamentals taught to them in a certain order, it allows them to grow without really realizing that they're not on track to a certain milestone, because their tonguing just naturally gets faster. So it's much more fluid. But without these fundamentals, adult players, or any player actually, without all these fundamentals in place, the student then becomes aware that they can't tongue fast enough, or they can't hold their breath long enough, and they think that they're just not at that level yet. But what they're actually missing is the fundamental skill that will let them progress without realizing that there's any kind of roadblock. So here's what I teach beginners in this order from day one. For adult students who I'm not teaching as a beginner because they can already play, this is what we go back and insert into their playing. It doesn't have to be in this order, but we plug all these holes that I'm about to tell you. We plug all these holes and give them the ability to then progress. Okay, so day one, embouchure and sound, same thing. Correct embouchure, get a good sound. Posture and hand position. This is not normally day one, this is normally second lesson. By posture, I'm talking about not just standing up straight, but actually bringing the flute to you and making sure they have no tendency to do that, because that kills a lot of things in your flute playing later on. So bringing the flute up to you, using the right muscles as you bring the flute up, standing in the right way so that you're not squashed. This is literally in the first few lessons. Then fingerings. And more to the point, not just remembering fingerings, but changing between certain fingerings enough to play a scale or a melody or a few of each, so that they get used to changing between notes and they get the practice at it. Then comes high note technique. And high note technique, I'm talking about starting at this E. That is the first note that we use in learning high note technique, and then from there we gradually build on those notes. And I mean gradually. Like it can be months down the track for someone to get an octave above that, maybe years down the track to get that note comfortably above that. I mean, that wasn't very clear, sorry. That E is the fundamental step to learning proper high note control. And then once you've got it on that E, you can start applying it note by note above that. And that for some people that takes a few weeks, some people it takes a few months, some people it takes a few years. It's all good. Okay, next thing, listening to yourself and being aware of what you play. And because when I teach students to listen to themselves, you could call it oral skills, it means that they can self-correct. They'll still need to know the proper technique to do something, but when they know it, they can hear what they're doing and they can know if they're on the right track because they can hear it. Makes a better musician too. Tonguing, so proper tonguing. Breathing. Breathing is really important because it's connected to expression later on. Sense of rhythm. This is like listening to yourself, the oral skills, but the oral skills is a lot about the notes and what pitch and the detail of what you're playing. But the sense of rhythm is like an internal sense of beat that you can then layer good rhythm on top of. So then that leads on to reading music. So reading music is made up of notes and rhythm, and you need that internal sense of beat, sense of rhythm, to be able to read music accurately and play the music accurately. So there you go. That's the list. That's the list in the order that I build up a beginner on. That's what I'm thinking of creating my absolute beginners course based on that. The Flute Academy is based on that, but it's for students that can already play, adult students that can already play. So the Flute Academy is basically plugging holes of everything I just said. The Flute Academy plugs those holes, and then you can run with it once you're done with the academy. So there you go. That's good. That was good for me to think about and actually put that down on paper. Second question that you had, what flute pieces do you think every flute player should have in their repertoire? Oh, good question. I think Baroque is great. Baroque sonatas. So Bach sonatas, Handel sonatas, Telemann sonatas, or fantasies. Great. Mozart flute concertos. Mainstay. There's two, one in D major, one in G major, both awesome. The reason they're really important is because when you do auditions at a high level, the auditioners usually ask for one of those concertos. The next thing is French flute school music. So early 1900s flute music in Paris exploded. It's because the flute had recently been upgraded to its fine form with fingering that is easier. For example, okay, so Boehm did an overhaul of the flute way back, 100 or more years ago. More than 100 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. And so the fingering is quite easy, from F to G to A to B. You're lifting one finger at a time. Boehm did that overhaul, which meant the flute had a whole lot more capability. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the French flute school music just exploded with amazing romantic flute music. Fantastic stuff. So look up French flute composers from that era and you'll get a whole lot of stuff by Tafanel, Gorbert, Chaminade. Oh, what else? What else? Oh my God. Anyway, there's heaps. It's amazing. Dutilleux, Sancan, that's Sancan. Anyway, lots. And finally, modern flute music. I don't mean modern techniques on the flute, like flutter tonguing and so on. I mean recently written music that is fantastic for the flute. Perfect example, Ian Clark. Writes incredibly for the flute. So he's recent, he's still alive, as far as I know. And he writes fantastic flute music. Okay, so the next question is from Ruth. How do I practice a very difficult passage in a piece? Then, how do I acquire the confidence to play it in public? I'm thinking at this moment of some measures in an unusually difficult piece by Mozart. Now, Ruth, I wish I had an extra 45 minutes and I would teach you exactly what I've taught in a workshop that I've recorded. It's about a half an hour workshop on practice technique, efficient practice technique. It teaches you how to pull apart a piece that has difficult passages, how to practice those passages, put them back into your piece and get these passages to the level that you know them so well that they are more likely to work under pressure, for example, in a performance. This is the best workshop. So the way to get access to this workshop, I'm working on this new program at the moment called the 5-Day Breakthrough. It's going to be released in the next few weeks, actually. It's almost complete. So early 2021, you'll see it released. It's called the 5-Day Breakthrough. It's a 5-day course. And on day 3 of that breakthrough, it's that workshop. I've recorded the workshop already, so I know exactly what's in it, and it answers your question exactly. Now, I mean, I'm not trying to pressure you into buying anything. It's going to be $50 or less than $50. So it's not very expensive, and it's such an effective. It's called a breakthrough for a reason. It's to help you get your playing up to the next level. And this workshop is one where you do it by learning effective and efficient practice techniques. In a nutshell, because I know you're not going to have that for another few weeks if you join the breakthrough. In a nutshell, what you really want to be doing is training your fingers to play the right notes so that when you're under pressure, they fall back on what they've done the most. So you want to be playing those difficult passages as slowly as you need, correctly, on repeat. The more times you play them right, the more likely your fingers and your brain are going to fall back on that as the default way to play it when you're under pressure, like in a performance. Okay, so hang out for that breakthrough if you want to join. And I'll move on to the next question. So Abha says, how can I improve my vibrato? Great question. Go back in this Flute Q&A and look for the question asked by Genevieve, because it's exactly the same as yours. And you'll see your answer there. Your second question is, how can I improve my double tonguing? Yes, there is a way to improve double tonguing. You need to get your g g g g g on the flute as clear as your d d d d d. So that's step 1. So your d, which is normal tonguing, you should be able to get your g g g g g as clear as your d. So you probably couldn't tell which one that was. That was g. And you couldn't tell because it's the same clarity as d. Then you want to get it clear going da ga da ga da. So D G D G D. D. I shouldn't really say D G. That's just in case you couldn't hear what I was doing. Da ga da ga da. You want them all to be clear like this. All the way through that was alternating between d and g. Then you want to swap it. G da g da g. G da g da g, and get that even between each other, all consistent. Then, if you can do that, you are on track to having amazing double tonguing. So if you want to be improving your clarity, that's how to do it. If you want to be improving your speed, do it in short. Get the clarity first, then do it in short bursts. Da ga da ga da, da ga da ga da, da ga da ga da ga da ga da. Then get your metronome, set it to that speed, and go up 1 notch. Da ga da ga da, da ga da ga da, da ga da ga da ga da ga da. You can do it without the flute like this, and you can do it with the flute. They both help you improve the speed. But only your flute playing will help you improve the clarity. So go up a notch and then keep going from there for the speed. And your last question is, are there any beginner to intermediate books you would recommend for Piccolo? No, there are no books I would recommend. And the reason for that is Piccolo technique is high octave, top octave flute technique, and then a bit higher than that. So it's learning the proper way to play the high notes on the flute. Learn the proper way to play the high notes on the flute so much so that your top octave on the flute is easy. And it's only when that is easy that you then transfer that across to the piccolo and do the same thing, and then it goes up higher as well. That is how you play piccolo. is when you can play the top octave on the flute with ease and without getting tired. Transfer that across to piccolo. Okay, Yosi asks, how do I strengthen my hands? I feel the flute slides off my left hand and my right hand hurts after 10 minutes. I'm a professional saxophone player and this doesn't happen on saxophone. So if your flute is sliding off your left hand, I'm thinking that you might have your flute too low. So see how you've got this joint here, then you've got this joint here, and then you've got the squidgy bit in the middle. Your flute needs to be resting on that squidgy bit. If your flute is lower and it's on that bone down here, did you see how I just moved the flute down? Your flute will slide off. So that could be what's happening to you. And you said that your right hand hurts after 10 minutes. Gosh, I don't know exactly what you're doing with your right hand, but obviously it's got to do with right hand position. There's so much detail to this that there's a whole section in the Flute Academy about stability, and stability of holding the flute obviously incorporates hand position. In a nutshell, make sure that your right thumb is not too far forward because your flute will fall back. Maybe that's what's happening with you. Well, I hope those 2 points helped you anyway. Because yeah, you definitely can get to a point where your hands are comfortable enough that you don't get pain. I mean, you shouldn't be getting pain when you play. Not at all. It means that something's either incorrectly positioned or you're too tight somewhere. And I think for you, I think it's the position, because you've got the experience as a saxophone player to know about not gripping when you play. Okay, Louise's question is, how do you know if you're in tune if you're just playing by yourself? It's a great question. So there's one way you can find out is you get a tuner and you play a note. You don't look at the tuner. You play a note the way you think is in tune, and then you look at the tuner and see if you were sharp or flat. This is not a way to practice, because you want to be able to play with good intonation by yourself without the tuner. But it is a good tool to see if what you were thinking was right. So if you play a note and you're like, yeah, that sounded in tune, you look and you're like, oh, I was sharp. So then you play it again and you're like, okay, can I get that in tune? You're like, okay, that was spot on. And then you do another note and you do the same thing. It's actually really good. It's a good tool, but don't solely focus on the tuner to play in tune. You need to use your ears and then use the tuner for verification. Okay, the next question is from Lily, and she asks, quite simply, how do I hold the flute? So Lily, that's a big question. I'm assuming you're a total beginner. If you're a total beginner, I'll give you a few pointers to get you going on the right track. You saw for the last question, probably, that your left hand, you need to be resting the flute on the squidgy bit of your finger, not this bone and not this bone, but in between. For a beginner, if you're a total beginner, your right hand thumb generally takes the weight of the flute. As you get more advanced, you will learn that it doesn't take the weight. You've got other areas of pressure that give you better balance on the flute. But as a starting point, that's fine. When you bring the flute up to you, it's really important that you do just that. You bring it up to you and you make sure that your head doesn't go forward. So on the side, make sure that you don't go like this. Make sure that you think tall, nice and tall, like imagining a string gently pulling you up, a thread. Bring the flute up to you. Try and relax your shoulders and use your arms to hold the flute up, not your shoulders like this. It's a few little bits of guidance. It's such a big part of starting to learn the flute. That would take, for a student to get to that point, it takes a few lessons to be using the whole flute in a comfortable way up here. And I'm answering your question in just a few minutes. I am actually thinking, you probably heard me mention about creating a brand new course for total beginners. This is many, many, many months away, but I'm thinking about it. If you're keen, let me know. Email me back. And I thought the camera froze then. Email me back, jane@flute.school. And I'm curious to know, Lily, would you be keen on a course like that? I'm not sure how many total beginners are out there and would benefit from a course. But it's something that I would break down, and it would be lesson by lesson by lesson, every little step that you need to add onto your total beginner flute playing. So I'm curious. Hopefully that helped you anyway. So Wolfgang, he says, I have a question that relates to buying a professional flute and flute brands. I know that 80% of the sound is the flutist, and the biggest part of the remaining 20% is the material and craftsmanship of the flute head. Yes, spot on. Did you get that from me? It sounds like exactly how I would say it. That's exactly right. 80%, or you could say 90%, 80%, whatever, of what you hear is the flute player. And then after that, it's the quality and the craftsmanship of the flute itself. So he goes on, I can certainly choose a flute that suits my requirements by playing it, but what I can't tell by playing it is whether it is well made and needs little maintenance. Therefore, I have to trust the experience of other flutists. Okay, let me answer that bit just first. I just booked in for a flute service for this flute. I bought this flute 2.5 years ago and it hasn't been serviced yet. Now that is kind of outrageous. I really should have got it serviced after a year or a year and a half. It is an excellent flute. Think of it like a quality car. If you buy a high quality car, the best thing you can do for that car is to have it regularly serviced, to keep the maintenance consistent. Because when you have a flute serviced or a really good car serviced, it's little tweaks every year, or every 2 years is okay if you're not playing that much. Little tweaks along the way that will keep it playing excellently for a very long time. So a good quality flute is not one that doesn't need servicing. Having said that, a bad quality flute needs a lot of servicing. Your good quality flute should not need servicing a lot. Once every year or two for little tweaks is good. If you're finding that you're having major issues with it after a few months, that doesn't sound like a good flute. All right, let me continue with your question. I own 2 flutes. The first flute only had to be adjusted after more than 20 years. The other had to be adjusted after 2 years, so there are huge differences. Okay, I just answered that bit. Then you asked, are Japanese flutes better than American flutes? And what can you recommend, and who else could I ask for recommendations? Japanese flutes and American flutes, as long as they're good quality ones, are amazing. There are also amazing flutes from other countries. My flute, funnily should mention it, this part, the mechanical part, is Japanese. It's a Muramatsu. The head joint is American. It's Williams. So this is a mixture of 2 flutes. The Muramatsu head joint is fine as well. It's that's another story why I have this different head joint. So who to ask? Your question and your questions is a question for high level flute manufacturers and flute repairers. So the best way for you to find out is to find a good quality flute salesperson / repairer / manufacturer in your country or in your city. Best way to find that out, go onto Facebook and search up groups for flute societies or flute associations. If you're in America, the National Flute Association has a Facebook group. I think it's even called National Flute Association, the Facebook group. That's what the association's called. Get into that group and ask for recommendations of flute shops in your city. The people that work at those flute shops are going to know a lot about all different brands and the highest quality flutes, how much they cost, how often they're going to need servicing, although I sort of answered that. I'm in Australia. Australia has different flute societies for different states. Whatever country you're in, just search for a flute society, flute association, or flute guild in your country, firstly. And then you can niche it down into your city. If you're in a massive city, you'll probably have a city-specific one. So there you go, and ask for recommendations of who to buy a flute from. That will give you loads of information, everything that you want and more. Okay, your next question is, when I practice scales, everything is all right except with B major scale. I find the transition from F sharp to G sharp, this is up high he's talking about, so these ones, and also A sharp to B, yeah, and backwards in the third octave is very cumbersome. It's not an issue with my embouchure, but an issue with my fingers. Is this just a matter of practice, or is there a trick like alternate fingerings? Are there any well-known pieces up that high in B major? If not, practicing this scale would probably be superfluous, right? Okay. No, there's no alternate fingerings. Well, sometimes there are alternate fingerings, like trill fingerings, but no, you don't need to practice you don't need alternate fingerings. Practicing those transitions are worth your while, and it's definitely not superfluous. There's definitely pieces up that high. I mean, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything up in B major up that high. But I tell you what, they're out there and they get used all the time. I play them all the time. Use B major up high all the time. The reason it's not superfluous practicing those transitions, because when I practice a scale, whole range of the scale like you're doing, that improves other scales. There's a flow-on effect between improving your general dexterity of your fingers that flows on into other keys and to other scales, so it's definitely worth your while. Okay, the next question is from Roger. I'm having a very hard time playing middle C up to E. My sound is very weak compared to, say, an octave above notes. I know to play slightly down on these notes, but I can't get much sound from them. Could it be my flute? I think all the pads are fine. Roger, if you think it could be your flute, or even if you don't think it could be your flute, it might be worth taking your flute to a good repairer and just getting their opinion. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking with your question. I'm not sure whether you're saying that the low notes are hard, or it's the higher notes are hard, or if it's the transition. I'm not sure if I can answer your question, because it depends very much on whether you're talking low or high notes. But I can tell you that if you can't get much sound from them, if you can't get much sound and you can't get much sound across all of your flute, it's either your embouchure or your flute. If you're getting a good sound out of some of your notes and not other notes, it also could be your flute. If it's generally like your low notes are okay but your high notes are hard, it's probably your embouchure. Now the opposite is true. If your high notes are fine but your low notes are difficult, it's probably your embouchure. If it's notes here and there, it's probably your flute. And if it's all your notes, it could be your flute. Anyway, take what you can from that answer and hopefully that helps you. Okay, Nigel asks, I still cannot play higher octaves even though I followed all your tips. Can you teach me how to play lower octaves too, because I cannot play them? I can only play low C. And thank you in capital letters with lots of exclamation marks. Nigel, that's amazing that you can play low C. Lots of people have difficulty with low C, and you can do it, which is great. So what I would suggest you do, if you've done the 2 free mini courses, one on high notes and one on tone improvement, have a think. When you did the tone course, for example, did anything help you? Did anything improve your tone just a little bit? If it did, take that and work on that, because you're only going to get more results if you work on what was already working. Same for the high note course. If you found that you got a little bit of like easier high notes or sweeter sounding high notes or softer high notes, just a little bit, take that and keep practicing that and keep improving that high note, because that is what's going to work for you. So that is my best advice for you. Okay, Jim asks, gee, I love this question. Why is it harder to play the flute in winter? I thought it was the air pressure, which to my mind should be heavier in winter because the air is cold, right? But using my barometer for a year, the air pressure, just turn my computer back on, the air pressure doesn't seem to be much different in winter, and in fact sometimes in summer it's much higher. Go figure. And then he says, I'm sure Jane can answer this question. Well, to tell you the truth, I have had the same question myself, and you've really got me thinking. So, This is what happens in my experience. I play in a marching band and I play piccolo. We rehearse outside in the mornings, early mornings, and then we do like a parade later in the morning. So the rehearsal is first thing in the morning, and I've noticed in my time in that band, it is harder to play the piccolo when it's cold. I come back a couple of hours later when it's warmed up, it's instantly easier. And I've always noticed this and I've always wondered why. So you've prompted me to do something about it. Now, I've never noticed that on flute, and I think it's because I don't play my flute outside in the mornings in the cold, and also because the piccolo is like an exacerbation of everything that's difficult on the flute. It's exacerbated on piccolo. So I think the piccolo is just more sensitive. Like I'm quite an experienced player on the flute, so I think I can get around things like that. But piccolo, if I'm a little bit out of practice, which I am this year because of COVID, I'm very sensitive to things like temperature change. So what you might not know about me is that I used to work in a musical acoustics lab at the University of New South Wales, so UNSW for short. That acoustics lab, so I was the musician, the flute player, that helped the physicist do their experiments on the acoustics of the flute. So I would hang around with physicists a lot, and these are the sorts of things that they would test. So I tried to figure out this question, the answer to this question, Jim, about why it's harder to play the flute when it's cold. I looked up a reference book that I've got on flute technique. I'm just feel bad. I can't remember what it's called. Is it called On Playing the Flute by Boehm? No, Quantz. Is it Quantz or Boehm? Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. That book was kindly sent to me by one of my online flute students. So Joseph, if you are watching, thank you. I love the book. Oh my gosh. I have to go and find out what it's called. Wait there. Okay, this is the book. It's by Boehm. I mentioned him earlier in this flute Q&A. The Flute and Flute Playing in Acoustical, Technical and Artistic Aspects. So this has got some acoustic answers in it. But the answer to your question was not there. So then I did some Googling. I did some research. Could not find anything. Then I went onto the UNSW Flute Acoustics website. Could not find anything. So then I emailed the professor of the acoustics lab on your behalf, Jim, to find out what's going on. I thought, okay, I've done my own research. I can finally ask him directly. Guess what he said? He didn't know. But his name's Joe. Joe and I are working on an answer because I've piqued his curiosity. So Jim, you piqued my curiosity and I've piqued his. We're going to find out the answer and I'll let you know. I'll let you know in the next Q&A when I find out. Because I'm really curious. Joe is even more curious than me, so that's pretty cool. All right, next question, and this is the last question. Julia asks, I've been playing the flute for about 2 years at school, but didn't really get into it until about 2 weeks ago. So when I play, it kind of sounds fuzzy to me. But my teachers have told me otherwise, and when I record it, it sounds okay, but not perfect. I want to know, how do I get a perfectly clear sound on the flute? Julia, if you haven't done the free mini course, go and do it. I'm going to put a link under your question for you so that you can get into the free mini course called How to Instantly Improve Your Tone on the Flute. That is the best thing that I suggest for you right now. It tells you everything you need to know to get started on improving your tone. You'll hear a difference straight away. So that was it. That is the longest video I have recorded in my life. You guys are so enthusiastic with all your questions. I love it. I totally love it. So the next Q&A is on the 2nd of February, 2021. So make sure you email me well in advance of that time. Start emailing me now, in fact, so I can start collating and preparing your questions and the answers for February. I wish you the best for 2021. Again, I hope it's a better year for everyone, and I hope your flute playing is going well. I'll see you later.